No, he's only one.
Right. Let's break down.
Of John Mark, Barnabas's nephew, according to.
What's up? What's up, Henry? How you doing, bro? Watch Nick Rochefort do the JLP. I think I did watch that. And no, you're wild, bro. You're wilding out here. The hell? Did yours when you had dinner the other night? How you doing, Henry? How you doing? That's crazy work, bro. Crazy work in the chat.
Tradition. During the journey, John Mark abandons Paul and Barnabas. As the second journey would begin, Paul and Barnabas got in an argument over whether Mark should join or not. They separate path, and Paul takes Silas with him while Barnabas takes Mark. Paul later went on a third missionary journey with Luke and Silas, which is recorded in great detail in the book of Acts. The first journey of Paul was approximately 2,000 kilometers, and the second and third journey both involved over 4,000 kilometers. Traveling was largely done on foot. The last details we hear about Paul come from Acts, where he is under house arrest in Rome preaching the gospel. Historians are divided as to what happens afterward. Some suggested that he was freed and that he went as far as Spain, and then was arrested once more and was executed then. Others believe that he was eventually put on trial and executed after the house arrest. During the first century, many of those who have seen and heard Christ began to pass away. In fear of losing the memory of Jesus, the apostles began writing what Justin the Martyr calls the Memoirs of the Apostles. These came later to be known as the four accounts of the gospel, known to us as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The last of those accounts might have been written with the dawn of the second century. As the disciples would preach the gospel and then move to the next country they are about to preach in, they would send letters to reach out to those who have already believed, confirming them in the faith and advising them to walk worthy of the calling by which they were called. These letters were immediately seen as authoritative by those who received them. However, no one would see them as a canon of Scripture until the end of the 2nd century and the beginning of the 3rd century, when we would see the first list of books of the New Testament. Other edifying writings were composed, such as the Shepherd of Hermas. Local churches had different ideas of what books were authoritative and what books were not. For example, the second epistle of Peter, James, and Jude were seen by some as authoritative, while others saw them as simply letters or even disputed letters. The major sees of Christianity begin forming throughout the 1st century. Eusebius and Irenaeus of Lyon gives us a record of how Peter and Paul together established the Church of Rome, which emerged as a number of bishoprics that came later to be united under one bishop. With the preaching of Mark, considered a disciple of Peter by Irenaeus, the Church of Alexandria was established. Mark would write a gospel around the year 60 AD and compose a liturgy which was later edited by the Alexandrian pillar of faith, Cyril of Alexandria, in the 5th century. Paul and Andrew would preach in Greece and what would later become the Church of Constantinople. It is believed that one of the churches there was presided over by Onesimus, the slave Paul freed through his plead with his master Philemon in a letter which would later become part of the New Testament.
Yeah, Henry Laz is he's a known troll in the chat. Someone I'm, some might say, fortunate enough to know in person. So, you know, he's a little salty. He's a little, he keeps his defenses up by saying obscene things. But yeah, I'd prefer if he was somewhat respectful, to be honest. But hey, here we go. All right, so I was just playing some games while I waited for people to get in, but it sounds like seems like we're getting pretty set up here. So let me switch up the view here.
Antioch, as mentioned.
We're just talking about some church history. We can talk about any type of history from whatever you guys are interested. I was just learning about some Crusades history, which was very interesting. I think we, in America at least, we don't get a very holistic historical education anymore. It's mostly focused on STEM, science, math, which is good. All that stuff is good. But a lot of the minutia of history that really puts us where we are today is just kind of either glossed over, ignored, or in the worst case, misrepresented by our history education. So that's why I thought it'd be fun and important to do a little history day. So hopefully you guys enjoy that.
Mentioned earlier, had Peter, Paul, and Barnabas play a role in its.
And good morning to you, brother. Good morning to you. Where are you? Are you in America? Or are you somewhere else? For me, it's the early afternoon. It's like noon. So good morning to you, brother. Welcome. Actually, why don't we get a little more granular with it?
Establishment. The Church of Antioch.
Maybe what we can do is this looks interesting.
One day, God, or Lord, as most commonly referred to in the Old Testament, asks Abram to leave his country and people, travel to the land of Canaan, and establish a new tribe there.
Afternoon, morning, same old, same old. Depends on who you are, where you're at. So, happy morning. Good morning to you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. We're doing a little history channel today. I'm going to let you guys direct what kind of history you want to learn about. As a default, I'm going to start with the Jewish history, the history of the ancient Israelites, as far as we can know it. And then maybe we can compare that to some biblical passages or something like that. But we'll let this go wherever people want to take it, really. So feel free to drop questions. Feel free to enter the Discord, which is in our, actually I'll link in the chat real quick. Welcome, Sean, in the Discord. I see you there. And I will share my screen there so that you can follow along with what we're doing. Okay. So, let's do it.
According to the Old Testament, at the age of 75, Abram heeds this call, setting out on this journey with his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot. After a long journey, they arrive in the promised land of Canaan, where they are told that this land is chosen for them and granted to their lineage. but the land of Canaan was already inhabited by various Canaanite tribes before he arrived. These tribes are mentioned in several passages of the Old Testament. The most frequently mentioned Canaanite tribes are the Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, Jebusites, Perizzites, and Girgashites. The Canaanites were a diverse group of people with their own distinct cultures and languages. They were primarily agriculturalists, but they also engaged in trade and other economic activities. The Canaanites were also known for their religious practices, which included polytheism. The biblical narrative does not provide a specific date for his arrival in Canaan, but it is generally believed to have taken place in the early 2nd millennium BC. The relationship between him and the Canaanites is complex and often fraught with tension. In some passages, the Canaanites are portrayed as hospitable and welcoming to him and his family, while in other passages they are portrayed as hostile and antagonistic. Despite the challenges he faced, he eventually established himself and his family in Canaan. At the age of 99, Abram makes a covenant with the Lord.
Yeah, so to the martial history is important. Nefarious actors love to revise it to fit their agendas. Definitely revisionist history is huge. You could say history is writ by the victors often. Usually, always. One example is how modern scholars claim that Achilles was gay. I haven't heard that one, but that's interesting. It's kind of crazy to have a take that like a mythical person is gay or like anything about their sexuality. So that would be funny to see how they rationalize that. Maybe we can look that up.
And his name is changed to Abraham.
Actually, we'll do that right now. Because I'm actually curious about that.
You got it fixed, I see.
What's that? Oh, the Discord? Yeah. Welcome, Infamous. Yeah, I got the Discord fixed. We're kind of doing general history today, so I'm going to let the chat direct where we want to go.
Sure.
And, yeah, we're just kind of jumping around, but,
I'm able to be around for like an hour.
okay, word. We'll just watch a short about this because something tells me it's not super serious topic.
The
but...
truth about Achilles and Patroclus. In the movie Troy, we see Achilles and Patroclus are very close because they are cousins. However, in ancient sources and according to some authors, Achilles and Patroclus were lovers.
Oh my
Achilles was the son of Peleus, the king of Phthia, and Patroclus was born in a place called Opus. Patroclus was exiled from his hometown when he was a child and was then adopted by Peleus, where he was raised alongside Achilles. In Bibliotheca, written by Apollodorus of Athens, it writes «Και φυγών μετά του πάτρος παραπηλέει κατόκι, και Achilleos ερώμενος γίνεται», which translates to «and having fled from his father, he lived in the house of Peleus and became the beloved of Achilles». There are many other sources, including Shakespeare's play Troilus and Cressida, that imply that Achilles and Patroclus were more than friends. Comment whether you think this is true.
I mean, it seems like a stretch, but maybe. Who knows? You know, the Greeks are definitely known for a certain type of lifestyle. That's for damn sure.
You mean that they had gay people? Sure.
Yeah, that they had gay people and pederasty and all that. So you never know. But okay, this is actually more interesting. The entire life of Abraham
was born 4,000 years ago, here, in one of the oldest cities in history, Ur of Mesopotamia. According to the Bible, only a few hundred years had passed since the Great Flood, and Abraham's great-great-granddad, Noah, was coming to the end of his life. What most people don't realize about Abraham is that even though Noah probably taught him about God, the Bible says that he and his family worshipped Mesopotamian idols until one day something shocking happened. The God of Noah spoke and told Abraham something very strange. Get out of your homeland, because not only am I going to give you new land and make a great nation out of you, but the entire world is going to be blessed because of you. We're going to see exactly what God meant by this strange promise in just a moment. But first, you gotta see what Abraham does next. By faith, he took his family and just left. He most likely would have taken this common trade route where he could make stops along the way until his family arrived here, the city of Haran, possibly named after Abraham's brother. Which reminds me, Abraham's dad Terah actually named him Abram.
I actually don't know how much
You'll
like
see why
historical
it gets
standing there
tricky.
actually is for Abraham like being a person. I
Yeah,
imagine
I'm
less
not
than Jesus.
Yeah, definitely less than Jesus. I'm not sure what.
Not only
like-
because of the age difference, but because of the fact that like he was like a completely insignificant person. He didn't actually like say anything about himself.
Right. Yeah, it kind of comes down to whether you believe that he wrote the Tanakh, which is the sort of accepted tradition.
I don't
So
know
if
if he
you-
wrote it. He probably had a scribe say it or something. There's no reason
Or
to
no,
think
I'm
Abraham
sorry.
until
I'm
the end of
sorry.
his
I'm
life.
sorry.
Like,
The accepted tradition is that Moses wrote it. Sorry, that's my bad. So yeah, even
Yeah.
that is not. Yeah, I mean, I tend to like unless there's something that explicitly shows that he's more mythological than actual. I just believe that Abraham existed. I'll take the history of the Old Testament pretty seriously, just because it's sort of our only even remotely historical document from this time. And then it's like you're describing an ancient nomadic sort of dynamic relationship. It's hard to have like hard history or archaeology about that type of thing. So yeah, I'm not sure if there is like a scholarly consensus about whether he lived and existed, but I'm certainly happy to accept that he did, and that these stories are accurate, at least, I don't know, symbolically, or I don't know. It's sort of like I operate on the principle of like, if I have no explicit reason to believe that it didn't happen, or like, for instance, that the flood was not global but rather local, then I'm just going to accept kind of what I'm reading. But yeah, that's a good question. That's a
I
good
feel like
question.
that might be. I feel like that might be a bad epistemology, but sure.
Might be, but just on the, I don't know, on the normal level of going through my life and stuff, you know. I don't know.
I mean, I could believe that there was a dude.
Yeah.
Believe that.
Yeah.
Believe a dude that did something like these things.
Right. It's not.
Well, not parting the Red
unreasonable.
Sea, but
I mean, there had to be some way that Israel started. I mean, there just had to be some origin to it. So
the big thing that's kind of like the nail in the coffin for the historicity of the Gospels is like the mention of like the 4,000? No, it wasn't 4,000. Whatever amount of Jews were in Egypt, because it states that they went from one place to the other, but like if they held hand to hand, they would have stretched all the way from Egypt to wherever they were going. I forget where they were going, but
yeah, it's important to remember how numbers are used in ancient texts. If you're talking about the Exodus from Egypt, so usually numbers when they're saying like, and then tens of 10,000s left, they're more saying.
Well, it's not an unreasonable
giants.
number for a population of people. That's the thing. It's not like an unreasonable amount of number. It's just that the fact that the distance they're traveling doesn't make any sense for the amount of people. Like the amount of people is believable.
Yeah, but if you're saying it's not believable because of how far they traveled or for any other reason, then there's the point that numbers are used sort of abstractly in ancient writing. So tens of 10,000
I don't know
or
the
whatever
number that they gave.
number is. I can't remember exactly what it is.
It'd be funny if it was exact, though. I don't think you could argue your way out of that at that point.
Yeah, if they were like 343,723 people left or whatever, that would be one thing. But if you're using, you know, some sort of abstract number to describe a huge amount of people, that makes sense. But also, I mean, it's a sort of common, I don't know, it's like a myth that
Hyperbole, yeah.
that the Exodus, it has been disproven, that there has not, there's not evidence of, this number of people traveling that far, yada, yada, yada. But lack of evidence is not evidence of lack, right? So we don't actually know, just because we haven't seen the explicit, like, whatever, the imprint of
Right,
this
but we're not talking
giant
about the
number of
fact
people.
that it happened. We're talking about whether or not we're justified to believe it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So I think there's a couple responses to that. I definitely do think the Exodus did happen. I think there's room.
Do you think that it didn't happen in the numbers that are portrayed in the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could put it like that. I would just say I think the numbers that are portrayed in the Bible are used in a way that we don't use numbers. Yeah, so they can be hyperbolic.
I mean, we do use those numbers, like, oh, I had $1 million and I could have, like, just a lot of money.
Yeah, right. And we still do that today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a good point. But, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see what...
Later, Abram actually stays here for years until his father dies. It's not until he's 75 years old that he, his wife Sarai, and his nephew Lot leave Haran, only to end up in a place with people who are so evil, God actually shows up in person to do the unthinkable. But first, they stop in the strange land of Shechem. This city was in Canaanite territory. Take a look at these altars excavated from a local Canaanite city. The
I
Canaanites
can't
would do
remember if this
anything
place
to
was named
appease their
after the
gods.
shekel or was actually the place where the shekel was made.
Oh, was it? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if there was
I can't
a
remember which one it
correlation
was, but I know this town has a connection to it.
there. To the shekel. That would make sense, Shechem. That's pretty cool. I like that little bit. I think
I think it's
point,
named after the shekel, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. It could be like a big mint or something from the ancient world. So another interesting point here. This is when we talk about the pre-incarnate Jesus showing up as the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. There is exegesis to support that one of the angels that came to visit Abraham and had this whole saga with Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed Jesus. And there's a specific verse, which we should find, which says, "The Lord called to the Lord in heaven to rain down fire on the earth." So the implication is that the second person of the Trinity called upon the first person of the Trinity to rain down this destruction. So that's one quick little proof that people use to show Jesus in the Old Testament. Just throwing that out there, which is why we have this picture here of him. Okay, we'll continue.
He was probably grateful that God had never asked him to sacrifice anybody. God was totally against this horrible ritual, right? Later, you'll see why God asks Abraham to do the unthinkable. But first, he traveled to Bethel, but he wasn't there long before a famine came over the land, forcing his family to travel all the way down to Egypt. Here, our man of faith tells his wife something I'm sure every woman would love to hear from her husband. "My dear wife, you are so incredibly beautiful to look at, but you're a little too beautiful.
Yeah.
Can you just tell people you're my sister so the Egyptian men don't kill me to get to you?" Yikes. But
Which happens multiple times, by the way. There's either 2 or 3 instances where Abraham pretends that his wife is his sister so that she doesn't get taken. It's just kind of crazy how the old world works like that sometimes, but I don't know.
he wasn't totally wrong. When one of the pharaohs in Egypt saw Sarai, he immediately wanted to know her, biblically. But
Yeah.
before he could even touch her, God sent plagues to Pharaoh to warn him that she was married. So he kicked Abram and his family out of Egypt. But when they arrived back to Canaan,
Isn't this
there was a
literally
problem.
Abraham's fault?
Abram's sheep
Yes.
and Lot's sheep had
Definitely.
multiplied, and so had
'Cause I don't know if it's that Pharaoh or the second is.
It's like, okay, she's my sister. It's like, oh, so she's available. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, literally. And that's what I think. I don't know if it's that instance or the other instance where the Pharaoh, after he realizes that God is punishing him for trying to hit on Abraham's wife, who's his sister, which, by the way, it's not technically a lie. It's kind of like a very sneaky thing. Like, she is his sort of like cousin or sister-in-law, so they are like relatives.
That's disgusting.
But they're also married, and so that's the more important relationship.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, if I remember, I mean, it's not so out there. Like, it's
It's
something
not
where
like
they're
God
not.
cares about,
blood.
incest throughout the Bible.
Well, it's not incestuous. It's like I believe it's some kind of sister-in-law or something, right? So it'd be like if
No,
you're.
I'm saying that God doesn't have a problem with incest. That was my main point.
Yeah, I mean, well, he definitely forbids it in Leviticus, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, actually, interestingly, to the same extent that we forbid it in our laws, and our laws are not biblical.
I mean, how do you explain Cain and Abel?
That is a debate, actually, and the question is, so we get these weird moments in Genesis where it's like Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden, and then what happens next? They like incestuously create every single human, but we actually get little like snippets of other people being around. So that's a really interesting point to think about. And so it might be the case that there were other humans to sort of like, I don't know, breed with or whatever it was.
Yeah, so you've committed sin, so I'm gonna create more sinful people, like, so you could fuck them, like,
well, I mean, in a sense, that is what happens.
I mean, in
like
either
anybody
case,
that is
up.
the product. I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Because
that's a
in
debate
one
we have to
case
get into more
you're,
specifically.
yeah, I mean, in one case you're like creating a bunch of pre-built sin people, unless you're saying there was multiple Gardens of Eden, of Eden.
Yeah.
And then in the other case, you're saying that it's incestuous. So both, you know, I mean, I guess the incestuous one is technically a little less bad.
Yeah, or I guess, yeah, I'm actually not sure exactly how. I can't remember exactly how the argumentation goes about what the nature of those other people that are around are.
Yeah, I mean, there just wouldn't be enough genetic material if it's just the two of them, and if there's just more people, then like you'd have to say that God either had more Gardens of Eden, or he and they all made the same choice, which I feel like is the only moral argument you could actually make for this.
Yeah.
Or what's it called? He just created a bunch of pre-built sin people, which now the whole story of the Garden of Eden separating God from being evil is just on. Like, he made that choice. He made you evil.
Or no, I mean, or you could say that God elevated like whatever, you know, and I'm not necessarily making this argument, but like whatever Neanderthal, whatever that like genus of human is that's either around or that Adam and Eve were sort of before God gave them like consciousness.
Oh, you're just gonna say that he turned animals into humans?
Essentially.
Abraham was born 4,000.
Something like that, but I'm not making that argument. I don't know exactly. I'm not super well versed on this. This is a very niche kind of like topic, whether there were people other than Adam and Eve like outside the garden. I'm not sure. So we got Marshall in the chat. The Jewish history is intertwined with Persian history. Cyrus the Great was known as a friend to the Jews after the destruction of the first temple, and even helped rebuild the second temple. That is interesting. Yeah, that was certainly one of the great empires, the Persian Empire. Wow. Okay.
Looks like today in just a moment. But first, I want you to know that I love making these videos. Night and nutrient. This of age. Joel Kramer, in his best-selling book Where God Came Down, explains that this site had been preserved for thousands of years by Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike. But why would they do that? The answer lies at the very center of this entire site. The remains of an altar was found and dated to the time of, you guessed it, Abraham. But this site is so much more than just one of his campsites. You're going to see later that this is the place God physically came down.
Pause.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. The evidence presented is Abraham was in this place, kinda. Mm-hmm. This place is clearly in this place, kinda. The two are connected, like.
Well, sorry. What's the problem with that? So, like, if we have this, like, hypothetically, or so say we have this story, an ancient story, an ancient history. Is evidence of
Stonehenge evidence of a person living at Stonehenge?
I mean, yeah. Unless you think aliens made Stonehenge or something.
No, I said a person living at Stonehenge.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying Abraham didn't step across the rocks at one point, but even then, like, you have to have some kind of evidence that this man was even here.
But the evidence would be that he, like, talked about it and described it, and then that's an actual place. So how would he, if he never existed or didn't talk about it or didn't describe it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. How well did he describe it? What are his words? And, are there other places like this?
Yeah, I mean, the Old Testament is rife with ancient descriptions of ancient cities and provinces
cities
and
obviously
towns
exist,
and principalities.
But if you talk about them, right, Like, I can talk about New York. I've never been there, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of the people talk about Jesus who never met him.
Yeah, but
Like,
you
the
can
Bible's
only
filled with
talk
shit like that.
if you lived sans internet, TV, even books, then you couldn't talk about New York unless you'd been there.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that, like, word of mouth was a thing. It's not like people didn't travel places. In fact, the whole point of the Gospels is that while a lot of them didn't meet Jesus, they talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so, like, you can describe a place to me very well, and I can get the general gist of it. Especially Egypt, actually. So, like, I feel like there's no evidence that this man was ever here beyond the fact that he mentioned a general shape that we can ascribe to this. And, again, are
yeah,
there more
maybe it
places
doesn't
like this?
prove anything, but it definitely contributes to the evidence.
Well, I'm talking about
that-
historical evidence. I'm not talking about, like, proof. We can't
Yeah,
prove
yeah.
anything
So I mean,
historically.
that is a historical evidence. So one of the criteria for historical evidence we use, even especially
No,
when
it is
looking at the
evidence. I'm
Bible-
just saying, is it enough evidence?
maybe not. It depends on the person. I mean, yeah, no, probably not that in and of
Because,
itself.
like, the
would-
existence of Göbekli Tepe doesn't mean that a man who lived around Göbekli Tepe and maybe had talked about it once has been there. It's not evidence for towards that. It's that he knows of the thing.
No, but if he described it accurately, then you would say, well, okay, this person probably existed at that time around that place.
Sure.
At least to
I
know
don't even know
about it.
necessarily
So-
around that time. I think they're dating him and his stories to the archaeology. I feel like they're dating those separately and then correlating them, which is fine. That's just how they're doing it.
Okay, yeah, that's possible. I just know one of the reasons we know that the gospel accounts are extremely historical and written within a lifetime of, say, Jesus, or that these people were living in that region at that time. The gospel, yeah, exactly.
Like, one gospel was written within a lifetime.
No. I think it's fair to say 3 were, and then even John is.
3.
Well, I think it's fair to say that Matthew. Well, I think it's fair to say that at least Matthew and John were direct disciples of Christ, so that's obviously the same lifetime.
Matthew and John met Christ?
Yeah, I think that's the generally accepted.
I don't know if that's true. I don't even think we have, like, I don't think that's true at all. Why are we talking about the 300 then at that point? Like, why would you ever talk about the 300?
The 300?
What
do you mean?
Yeah, the 300 witnesses.
What are you talking about? When are you talking about
The
300?
witnesses of Jesus, like
But
the
why
witnesses of
wouldn't-
Jesus' resurrection.
Yeah, why wouldn't you talk about that if you were
You're a first-hand
also-
account.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They're first-hand
dude,
accounts.
If
That's what I'm saying.
if I mean, I said if, but, like, also, if I was a first-hand account, I wouldn't be talking about, like, anyone else. Like, I wouldn't be talking about shit.
I would
I'd be like, I
would try
saw
to-
this motherfucker.
Yeah, I mean, they say that. They say, I saw, this and that or whatever. But then they would also, of course, mention the other people that saw it. They're trying to prove to people and give, like, oh, if you don't believe me, ask, there were 500 people at this event. Find any of them. They'll corroborate it, I don't see why that would be problematic for, like, a first person, for someone that was there at the time. I don't know. But anyway, so one of the reasons when you look at the gospel and people do, it's called, I think it has a fancy name, but it's some kind of like name and place analysis, where you analyze, okay, so they describe this exact type of tree growing in Jerusalem, right? And if the tree had been something that only grows in, like, Northern Europe, then you have real good reason to believe, like, well, this person actually doesn't know much about that region at that time. So they don't.
Speaking
But
of
when you
which-
go through the gospel, every single name, the consistency of the names is exactly what you would expect given, like, census data from that time of, like, what people.
Yeah, I'm not saying the
distribution of
Bible doesn't get
people's
place names
stuff like
right.
that.
Yeah, I'm not saying the Bible doesn't get place names right. It just doesn't get the
Yeah.
important ones right. Like, for instance, the tomb.
Well, that I think
But-
we do have that. But anyway, okay.
I'm pretty sure we have not found a tomb. But
We're pretty confident that it's at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. A lot of Protestants think it's at the Garden Tomb, but that's been disproven because that tomb is way too old to be the tomb of Christ. But the one at the Holy Sepulchre has a lot of good reasons to think it is actually the tomb that he was buried in.
sure. But, like, I mean, all the important ones, like, I don't know, the Ark. But
Sure.
the main thing that I was about to bring up is how do you view the whole mustard seed thing? I'm sure you've heard of it.
What, that anyone with the faith of a mustard seed could say to this mountain, move, and it'll move?
Yeah, he's like basically saying that the mustard seed is the small. In the original translation, he's saying that the mustard seed is the smallest seed, but it's not.
Yeah. Are you saying because there is a smaller seed, then that is a invalid parable?
I'm not saying it's invalid parable. I'm just asking what you think about it. Like, he's wrong, is what I'm saying.
No,
That doesn't
I think
mean he's not God. That
I
doesn't
think
mean he's
he's
not Jesus.
absolutely right. I don't think Jesus is saying, as a scientific fact, like, the mustard seed is the smallest seed. Therefore, believe in God.
I don't think this is a scientific claim, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah,
if I come and tell you my car is red and it's blue, that's not a scientific claim.
No, but it's a material claim or something. You're making some, but that's not what Jesus.
Yeah, I mean,
Jesus
it's
didn't
a
say.
claim.
Jesus didn't say, "Look at this mustard seed. Surely this is the smallest seed in all of nature," or something like that. It's not even close to what he said. He said,
"Yeah, I mean, in the translation we have now, in like the King James and shit,
have faith like that of a mustard seed, which is a tiny little thing, but then grows through living water." Well, water in the case of an actual seed, and the living water in the case of your faith, into the largest, or not. And again, it's like you're gonna say, well, it's not the largest tree. Fine, whatever. It's a tiny little seed that grows into this vast, sprawling tree that houses birds and everything. And so, like, the point is the parable, not whether a mustard seed is the literal smallest seed you can possibly imagine. But it seems like a perfect analogy. This tiny, tiny seed creates a giant, sprawling tree. Let's actually look up a mustard tree.
The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants, which, I mean, also isn't true, and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch on its branches.
Yes, yes.
Two things wrong with that.
So you think that's wrong because the mustard seed is not
it's
literally
wrong.
the smallest seed, and
I
probably
know what
literally
he's
is
saying.
the biggest garden.
If you said it's not. If you said
What's bigger?
right?
As a garden,
Orchards. Okay, hold on.
an orchard of like apples or something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
But,
Do those host the birds of the air or no?
Yes, all trees host birds. I mean, other ones than poisonous ones. But
Yeah, fair enough.
the reference is the parable of the mustard seed in Matthew 13, 31 through 32. Right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't say, because you were just defending it by saying, he doesn't say it's the smallest of all seeds. But now that I've pointed out he does say it's the smallest of all seeds, there's another excuse.
Well, to me, it just doesn't matter if it's the smallest of all seeds or not.
I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I just want you to admit Jesus was wrong.
No, I won't admit that. That's because that's.
But he's wrong.
That's a hyper literalistic like reading.
This isn't being literal.
It's completely
this is him saying
uncontextual.
it's the smallest of all seeds, and it's nothing to the context. As in, like, if I was to say the whole parable without saying it's the smallest of seeds, it'd serve the exact same purpose.
Except
right?
you wouldn't get hyperbolic.
For instance,
Yeah. Okay.
I would just use the actual smallest seed because I'm God.
Okay. What is
That's
that?
the first thing I would do. I mean, I can get it up to you.
Yeah.
Orchard seeds are much smaller. They're like dust size.
Okay.
Right? But
Yeah.
like, if I was to do that, that would be fine. Or if I was to just not say it was the smallest seed, because everyone knows what the fucking mustard seed is, and you're just like, you have the faith of a mustard seed. You know? That's fine. But he went as far as to say it is the smallest of all seeds. Do you see how that doesn't change the parable at all if I wasn't to say that? If I was to say it's as small as the mustard seed.
Yeah, but
that's fine.
If you don't say it is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs to become a tree, then you miss the point of the parable. You see what I mean? Like the point of the parable.
And if you believe that, then you should think he would use the actual smallest seed.
Why? I would think he would use something.
Smallest seed.
Think he would use something that was easily and immediately recognizable by the people he was talking to, and I would expect.
See, and that's
him
where
to
the other
use...
point changes, where I would just say mustard seed. I wouldn't say mustard seed is the smallest of all plants. See how you're bouncing, like.
But do you see how
one
you're
point doesn't
reading
work
this?
for the other.
Do you see how you're reading this
I'm not reading it unintuitively. He said it's the smallest of all seeds. That's not needed for the parable.
Because
But
you're
it's
looking
wrong.
for, but it is unintuitive because he's literally speaking a parable, and you're asking for like some kind of scientific description of what the smallest.
I'm not asking
seed
for
is.
anything
So
scientific.
if you were
keep going
Jesus,
back
you
to
would
this
just
like
say,
I have to be materialist or scientific. This is a fact that any layman motherfucker working on the construction sites would be like, this shit is wrong. Like,
I wouldn't. I didn't even know that. So I don't work on a construction site. I'm not an ancient person, so I would just assume the point of the parable, which is that
No,
the
no, I'm
smallest
saying
amount
now,
of
our
faith
interpretation
creates
now.
the largest amount of like spiritual growth or life or whatever.
yeah, even if you were to just say the smallest seed, like you didn't even mention the mustard seed. You were like the smallest seed. There you go. Now you've got it.
What kind of image would that be? I don't know. Yeah, this just seems like a super like again, I hate to keep accusing you of this, but like pedantic point where you hyper
Well, I'm
focus
not
like
saying
what
that
Jimmy
this proves
Aiken
that
was talking
God
about.
isn't correct. I'm not saying this. Sorry, no. Well, I am actually saying God isn't correct.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm not saying that God doesn't exist here.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
know, I
saying
know, I
that
understand
the
that.
Bible is untrue. I'm just saying, can you admit that the fact he said here, and it's not a hyperliteralist view because we just went through the context of it and how it doesn't matter. Can you admit the sentence that he said, where it is the smallest of all seeds, is wrong?
In the hyperliteralist like
It's
paradigm,
not hyper literal.
yes.
We already separated it from the story. The story
Well, just
doesn't
because you
need the
say
purpose of
it's not,
smallest of
yeah. If
seeds.
you want to separate all the words from their meaning, then sure, yeah.
No,
I guess
didn't separate
whatever,
the
he's
words
wrong.
from their meaning. I literally, we can go through the whole Matthew 13.
Sorry,
right?
if you want to
And
separate
this-
the words in a sentence from the meaning of the sentence of the parable,
That's
then yes,
not
you're
what I
right.
said. You
Then
can
fine.
rewind the stream. That's not what I said. I said
Okay.
that we went through and removed the idea that the story would change or the message would be weakened by not saying the smallest of all seeds is the mustard seed. We removed that because it doesn't.
Okay.
It's not necessary for the message to be as strong as it is. You can say the smallest seed. You don't
Yeah.
have to mention the mustard seed, or you could get it correct because you're God, and it's not like you're not used to saying confusing things to the people of Jerusalem or like anything
Yeah.
else,
Okay.
right? You could just say
you don't-
that and be
yeah.
correct.
So
Or you can just say it's as small as the smallest seed and grows as big as the biggest of garden plants. You lose nothing.
Okay, we do have people bored in the chat, so I'm going to respond to them, but I'm just going to give you one quick reminder. Do you
my
remember
bad.
when Jimmy Aiken said, gave the example of Captain Spock, or Captain Kirk, saying, Scotty, when are we arriving to the planet? And Scotty goes, in 3 hours, Captain. And then Spock says,
Well, that's
incorrect.
incorrect because it's
Incorrect.
actually
It's
that-
actually
yeah.
2 hours, 59 minutes, and 54 seconds. And it's like, okay, they're both right, but who has the? Well, I guess the question would be, it was.
You're saying God
was
is rounding
Scotty
up?
was Scotty wrong to give that sort of like slightly zoomed out view that gives the whole message in a more simplistic way that the captain was
Oh
actually
no,
asking for?
colloquially I'd say he's correct. Colloquially I'd say he's correct.
Okay, so colloquially, Jesus is correct.
Except he
so I'm
wasn't
not going to say
making an
Jesus is
absolute.
wrong.
Except he wasn't making an absolute claim about the state of the thing. It's not the smallest of all seeds.
Okay,
And
fine.
the thing about numbers is that you're right. You can keep going. It's actually 0.00000.
Yeah.
You can keep
And so
going.
for this, you could
Once
keep
I've
going,
said
too.
smallest or biggest, there's no identity there that will change by going deeper or being more specific. It is an absolute statement. Me saying, like, for instance, if we got to the most zeroth of number, right? I imagine only God could do that in your worldview.
Yeah.
He could be like, he could give you the perfect amount of time. Or he could be wrong. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, if you say, what time is it, God? God could give you the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But if he's
he
one
gave
off,
but if he told
he would
you
be
it's
wrong.
1:18 and didn't even say the seconds, he would also not be wrong. And in fact, that might even
Well,
be
he
more
would because he
useful
knows
to
exactly
you're
what
asking
time
for.
it is.
Yeah. But if you can't conceptualize that, then obviously he would
Well,
be
yeah,
correct.
we
to give
conceptualize
you-
it because it's an approximation, but the smallest of all
Alright.
seeds is wrong.
All right, let's go to the chat. I understand your contention here. I still think it's taking the Spock approach a little too seriously, but I appreciate that. I understand that is how you think about things and operate, and I appreciate that perspective in the chat. So thank you, brother. We'll let the chat decide if they think this is a instance of Jesus being wrong, and I'll just leave it at that. So let's go to the chat. Okay, yo, what's up? We got someone in the Twitch. Welcome, brother. Welcome, Brooklyn Blade. Right now we're talking about history. It's kind of a loose chat. We'll do whatever. Obviously, we're already into the gospel, which I love, but we'll see where that takes us. So, I see we're learning about botany today. Yeah, a little bit. This takes me back to my 2011 Christian days when I was a child on the internet arguing against atheist adults telling me God is not real. Yeah, well, that's sort of what we're doing here.
I mean, I wouldn't use the mustard seed to say God isn't real. I feel like that is very pedantic.
That would be pedantic, yeah. So then David says, my sister is a Christian botanist. Wow, what do you know about that? That's kind of fun.
Well, damn.
A true atheist. Maybe she can weigh in on the smallest seed. True atheists won't tell you God is not real. Then we see that that's a no true Scotsman fallacy. David says atheists simply aren't convinced by any evidence. I'm an atheist and I would never tell you God is not real because no atheist knows if God is real or not. That doesn't deny the fact that they presume.
It depends.
It depends on who you're talking to, of course.
It depends on who the god is, and it depends on what the argument is. I feel like there are certain arguments that can defeat certain gods, but I feel like if you don't use those arguments and you come to the same conclusion, then you're not justified in believing that the god doesn't exist, and I wouldn't say that you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and so David says, no atheist knows whether God is real or if there's a God. We talked about that. If someone ever says God is not real, it's simply that person's belief. I agree with you 100%
I mean, I would
that.
agree that it is their belief. I don't know if it is simply their belief. But...
I mean, it's their belief.
Would you say that your belief is just simply your belief, or do you think God is real enough to reveal it to us all?
Okay, that's a good way of framing it. But yeah,
that's how I frame it. Yeah.
I think, I have a lot of faith in my belief, but I'm not sure I could say that I know what objective truth is per se.
Well, we don't talk about objective truth when we're talking about
Okay, so no knowledge simply means agnostic. Yeah, I agree with that. I also want to resist
no knowledge means agnostic.
Well, you know what I mean.
I mean, no knowledge about the subject, I guess.
Yeah. So, but I want to resist this thing that atheists do, including you, Infamous, and you tell me what you think about this, which is that...
is it the burden of proof thing?
Well, no, it's just I'm an atheist, yet I don't say there's no God. I just don't...
I lack belief in it. Yeah.
I lack belief in it. I think that's a move to remove atheism from being a word. Because you're just describing agnosticism.
It's really not. It's really not. I don't believe God exists. I don't want people legislating laws based on it, and that's exactly what people do. I don't care if God exists or not. You'd have to prove it before I want you to put it in the legislation.
How would I prove it?
I don't care. It's not my fucking job.
No, I get that, but so then you are an atheist, I don't understand why not just say I'm agnostic, but I don't want laws to be made.
Because agnosticism is based on a question, right? When we're talking about agnosticism, you can be an agnostic Bigfootist, as in I don't know if Bigfoot exists, right?
Yeah.
So agnostic doesn't do anything. If we say I'm an atheist,
you said I'm a Bigfoot atheist, then what are you saying? You're just saying I don't know if Bigfoot exists, or are you saying I believe that Bigfoot does not exist?
Atheist means without God, as in I don't believe God exists.
Okay, there you go.
I'm an agnostic atheist, as in I don't know that God does not exist.
But I believe he doesn't, so that's important.
No, that's not saying I believe he doesn't exist. I said I don't know if he does.
Okay, so you're just agnostic. You're not an atheist.
No, I am an atheist because I don't believe God exists. That's the answer to the question. Do you believe God exists? If you accept it,
you believe he does not exist. That's fair.
That's not what I said. I didn't say I believe he does not exist. I said I don't believe he exists.
Okay, I do not believe God exists. Then what worldview does that put you in?
Atheist.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So why do we keep making
I feel
this
like
weird...
you're not. Yeah, I feel like you're not understanding.
I
don't believe God exists because he hasn't proven his existence.
Gotcha.
If I am in a courtroom and I don't believe he's guilty, does that mean I do believe he's innocent?
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, it means you have to say that he's innocent as the juror.
No, our court systems don't deal with innocence. We deal with one prong of one issue, and it's guilty.
Innocent until proven guilty. So if you fail to find the person
gives
guilty,
the juror of innocence. He could have done it. He could have done it. That's the thing. He could have done it. But I don't assess whether or not he did do it. I assess whether or not we can reasonably believe he did. I find God not exist. I find God not guilty of existing. Does that mean I think he doesn't exist, as in is innocent? No.
Yeah, okay. So this is a good. David in the chat says, atheism is not being convinced, like in parentheses, lack of evidence, that a God exists, right? Okay, so if you are not convinced that a God exists, what are you convinced of? That's the question.
I don't. Well, first of all, I'm not convinced of any actual reality based on him. Depends on the God, too.
But
like,
what
for
reality
instance,
are you
we've been through this before, and I'm going to give you the same analogy that I did back then, right?
Please.
We have a gumball jar. I shake up the gumballs, and I'm like, is the number even or odd?
I know.
And I say it's even. I say it's even. Yeah. What do you think? Do you believe it's even?
No, I don't know.
Okay, does that mean you believe it's odd?
No, not per se.
There you go. There's the atheist position.
But that's just, to me, okay, so we already have a word for that. It's called agnostic. So how is that atheist?
No, it's not. It's because...
An atheist would be, you say the number of gumballs in the machine is even, and if I were an atheist, I would say no, it's not. It positively is not even.
No, that's not what you're saying. There's two states of belief. You either believe there's a God or you don't. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now you either believe Bigfoot exists or you don't, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if you accept that you don't know he doesn't exist, does that mean that you're denying that he does exist?
Okay, I guess I see what you're saying here. Yeah, I'd be agnostic towards Bigfoot.
You'd be agnostic, right? But you'd put a tag on it because you don't actively believe he does exist. That's not saying he can't exist or does not exist. You just don't believe he does because you've no evidence shown to you that he does. Correct?
Yeah, that would be a purely agnostic position. I agree with that.
Right, it would be agnostic. However, you would also not believe he exists, which means you would be a Bigfootist.
No. Because
yes, you wouldn't believe he exists because it hasn't been shown to demonstrate that he has existed.
No, in that specific example, if I don't know either way, or I don't make any claim either way, maybe he exists, maybe he doesn't, then I'm agnostic. To be atheist would be
what belief do you hold right there? What belief do you hold about him right there? Because you're not acting as if he does exist.
Agnosticism. No, but I'm also not acting as if he doesn't.
Which means you don't believe he exists.
No. I'm saying I don't know whether he exists or not.
Okay, we're going to just go back to the gumball thing.
Go back to the
gumball analogy, right?
Yes.
If I say, I don't believe you that it's even, and I don't believe this other person that it's odd.
Yeah.
I don't believe either of them. I don't think it's even, and I don't believe it's odd. I don't believe either.
Exactly.
So I don't believe that he doesn't exist, and I don't believe that he does exist.
Right. That would be agnosticism.
Okay, so I'm not saying he doesn't exist, and I'm not saying he does exist. Do I believe he exists?
No. But you don't believe he doesn't exist, so you're agnostic.
I don't believe he exists.
So then why are you taking on the title of atheist, which by definition means you believe God does not exist?
That's not what that means. It's atheist without God.
I know you're redefining the word. I'm saying, why are you redefining the word?
I'm not redefining the word. That's the Greek definition of the word.
Okay, to David.
Like an atheist, like an anti-theist, right? Would not believe God exists and say he doesn't exist. That's the position you're trying to label it with. Atheism,
yes, that is the normal definition.
I don't believe he exists. Base, right?
But you also don't believe he. Wait, but you admit, but in this paradigm, you don't believe he exists, but you also don't believe that he doesn't exist, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that's agnosticism. That's what the definition is.
Yeah, I'm an agnostic
in no
atheist.
Sense is that
Do you not?
atheist.
Okay, listen.
No, it's
I'm
not.
an agnostic
simply
atheist.
Can't be.
Gnostic atheists believe that God does not exist.
Okay.
Like Gnostic atheists are anti-theists.
Yeah, and agnostic atheist is
don't believe in
self-defeating. That's two terms that are not the same as each other. That do not.
What are you talking about?
Cannot exist within each other's paradigms. If you're agnostic, you cannot also be an atheist, because if you're agnostic, you don't believe he exists, but you don't believe he doesn't exist. If you're an atheist, you believe he does not exist.
Do you believe the gumballs are even or odd?
No, I'm agnostic towards whether
do you believe
gumballs...
either of them?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you don't believe it's even.
I don't believe it's even, and I don't believe it's
I
odd.
don't believe God
Therefore,
is even.
I'm not atheistic towards it
Yeah,
being
okay.
either
You
even
are.
or
You're
odd.
atheistic towards both of them. You don't accept either of them. You're just putting a title on it, right?
That's a crazy way to redefine. Why are you trying
It's
to make
not
atheism
crazy. Stop
equal
saying
agnostic?
that we're redefining it.
You are. Okay, let's go to Mad Guy. Why do you think that people... I mean, not Mad Guy, David. Mad Guy, why do you think people have to have a belief? People can just not know and not have a belief. I completely agree with you. Those
Knowledge
people
and
are
belief
called...
are different things.
Those people are called agnostics. Okay?
Wrong, because agnostics deal with knowledge and epistemology. Belief is a separate claim, like atheism deals with belief in a god. That's the key thing here you're missing. Agnosticism deals with a separate sect of epistemology, which is knowledge.
Okay.
Belief is something like atheism or theism. Right. For instance, you can have a
Okay.
Gnostic theist, someone who knows God exists.
Right.
Right? Or you can have an agnostic theist who believes God exists, but doesn't know he exists.
Okay. Okay.
That's the difference.
Yeah, I think it's
I'm answering
total
two different questions
bastard.
with Gnosticism
I
and
realize
atheism.
how you have to frame this in order to hold that you can be both agnostic and atheist. But
Okay,
typically
first of all, I
when
don't
we
have to frame
talk
it anyway. I'm perfectly okay with actually debating that God does not exist. I think I can do that and win. However, this is absolutely how the words are defined.
I
Atheism
know.
deals with
I have a
belief in
problem with
section.
how the words have been redefined. That's what I have a
They're
problem
not
with.
redefined.
Okay, whatever.
If I
We'll
don't
give it
believe
to
in
you.
something, whether or not I think it's real or not, I'm that thing. That's how the a prefix works.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I can believe the thing doesn't exist and I'd still be in that category.
Yeah, that's why we call it a agnostic. You don't know either way, right?
Exactly. Agnostic, you don't know, right? But but are you claiming? But this is the thing: are you claiming that the subject doesn't exist? Like
When
if
you're
I don't know
when you're
God,
agnostic,
does that mean God
no.
doesn't
When you're
exist?
agnostic, you're not claiming that the other one doesn't exist. It seems insane to me to be
There you go.
atheist and claim that, oh well, it could be this way or it could be that way. That just is not what atheism means. You know
What
what
are
I
you
mean?
talking about? It could be. If I'm an agnostic atheist, do I claim absolute knowledge about everything?
No.
No, then God could fucking exist. I don't know. I haven't seen any argument to say that he does.
Okay.
Like, you see what I mean? Like, I have to not believe until you've given me sufficient evidence. What the fuck am I supposed to do? Believe in him without evidence?
I don't know. I'm kind of lost in the argument now, but that's okay. That's
should
fine.
I believe something without evidence?
Should you believe something without evidence? Yes. A lot of things you have to
What?
believe about it without
Okay,
evidence.
okay. Should
Yeah,
I
the
believe a
laws of
mundane
logic.
thing without evidence? For instance, like if you said you had $1 million.
No, you shouldn't believe every single claim without evidence, but there are things you must believe without evidence. You know.
Do you
that.
think the God claim is one of those things?
No, I think there's evidence to
Okay.
support the view that God exists.
Okay, so I should come to the belief in God based on evidence, yeah?
Well, there's multiple paths, but I think you should be able to give reason for your faith.
Let's say I don't
so,
have
yeah.
the option for a reason, like a personal experience.
Sure, yeah, I think that you could come to the knowledge of God through evidence and logic.
Okay, so let's say that evidence has not been presented to me, but I know that God is like a thing people think about.
Okay.
Should I believe before given sufficient evidence? To your degree, sufficient evidence for your satisfaction.
No, I guess not. I mean, maybe it'd be better for you if you did, but yeah,
Okay.
I don't see how I could like enforce you to believe in something that you have not sufficient evidence for or no evidence for.
Right. Okay. So the thing of God existing, I don't believe. Correct?
On the view of God existing, you do not believe. Yeah.
Okay. Does that mean I'm saying God does not exist?
No, but it does
Okay,
mean you're
there
saying.
we go. I don't believe that God exists, which is the first thing, but I'm not saying God does not exist, which is the second thing. And
Okay.
the first thing is still atheism, as in not a theist. Right?
Okay, yeah. It's extremely
There
technical.
you
I
go.
mean, nobody uses the
It's
language.
not
this way.
extremely technical. Oh my god.
Well, because if you meet someone and they say, I'm an atheist, it 100% of the time, always in your mind, means I believe God does not exist. I know, the words, well, technically it's atheism and this and that. Nobody uses the words that way. And it's confusing
I hate to say it, but
when you present the words
that's because the church loved to frame it that way for a long time. Like,
no. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yes, I agree, David. Right now we're completely stuck on definitions and totally micro issues that have no bearing. I just have a personal annoyance when people say they're atheists and then they say, "Well, I actually have no belief claim at all." Whatever, fine, maybe you don't.
Which is what A means,
but nobody actually operates that way. You believe something, you have a worldview, you operate under that worldview. It can be agnostic, but if it's atheist, then you operate under the worldview that God does not exist. That's called atheism. Okay.
No, I don't operate under the worldview that God does not exist. I operate under the worldview that I don't believe he exists.
But you don't you don't follow his laws, or read the scripture, or think about him. Do you operate under the idea?
Do you operate under the idea that the gumballs are even?
That what?
If you don't believe the gumballs are even or odd, do you operate under the worldview that the gumballs are even?
I operate under the worldview that I have no idea whether the gumball is even or odd. I would never say I know that one thing is not true.
So you don't have any belief about either of them, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But that doesn't make me atheist. That makes me agnostic.
It does make you an A-evenist and an A-oddist.
No, it makes me agnostic towards even and odd. Because I'm not A-oddist. I'm pro-oddist. Yeah, but you could. It's defeating because you could frame it the exact opposite way. Well, I guess I believe that they are odd, and I believe that they aren't even, or that they are odd and they are even because I don't know or whatever.
No, you can't believe in two contradictory things. I cannot believe neither of them, though.
Okay, yeah. Let's get off of this micro pedantism. Okay.
Why is it every time we get into something it's pedantic?
Well, on this case it's me being pedantic because I'm the one that is presenting the frustration with how these words have been defined and used in these conversations, and that's on me. So I'm the one being pedantic, not you. I think you're giving a good explanation and defense of what it means to be an agnostic atheist. I just think on the normal conversational intuitive level, those things are distinct and don't operate together in any meaningful way. So anyway, that's
they do because knowledge and belief, they're different things.
I get it. I know. Okay. So it seems like, it's unfortunate, but hey, at least we settled our definitions. Yeah, kind of.
I mean, we already had them settled, Luke.
Yeah, we already kind of know what our we cannot know until we count them, though. Yeah, definitely. I agree. Okay, so I agree with that too. I think we can.
I don't think you can know a God without a personal experience or great evidence. I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess a personal experience would be considered great evidence, but
yeah, that was probably the best evidence. Okay, what were we doing? I like this map of Abraham. Was there anything else? Okay, beliefs. Atheism is the belief that there is no God, a position of disbelief. Agnosticism, on the other hand, is the belief that the existence of God is unknowable, a stance of neither belief nor disbelief. We already talked about that. We don't have to get into that. Yeah. I agree with you, though, David. That's my intuition as well. Who, by the way, David, I believe, is an atheist. But anyway, atheism is the belief that there is, or at least agnostic. So then Marshall says, belief systems are ultimately reducible to value systems, which are reducible to value claims. It's inevitable that we believe in something, but you could believe in nothing. Yeah, so that's also
I don't think you could believe in nothing.
Yeah, I think it would be impossible to practically believe in nothing, but you could say that you do. Even though claim itself is a belief. Yeah, you couldn't do it logically. That claim
you're right. You got there before I did.
Yeah. Right. So, when people say, oh, well, I don't know, but I just don't believe in either one, then I would just simply ask the question, well, what do you believe then? Because I think everybody has a positive belief structure, whether they can articulate it or not. So I would just simply ask, well, what does one believe in? That would be my next move there. And then that would kind of clear up whether you're atheist or whatever you are, theist or okay.
And spoke to Abraham. But while Abram and his family were enjoying the peaceful countryside, things were not going so well for Lot. 4 kings from the east had come into the land of Canaan with one thing on their minds: stuff. And unfortunately, Lot and his family were living in cities that had a lot of cool stuff. So they attacked and raided the land, captured Lot, and made him their prisoner. Well, Uncle Abe wasn't too happy about this, so he turned his servants into soldiers and went on a mission to get his nephew back. Abram and his men were able to chase these kings away from Canaan and attack them at the city of Dan. But he didn't stop there. He continued to chase them past Damascus and retrieved Lot along with most of the cool stuff they had stolen. This allowed Lot to return with his family back to Sodom safely. Or so he thought. Very soon, you'll see one of the most tragic stories to ever take place on this map. The Canaanite kings praised Abram for his bravery and bringing them back their stuff. But in the midst of these Canaanite kings was another king, the king of a city called Salem, which is later called Jerusalem. This king's name is Melchizedek, and he's probably the most mysterious person in the entire Bible.
A lot of people argue that this is also an instance of the pre-incarnate Christ, although I'm not as convinced about that claim per se. But he is a really interesting, Melchizedek is a very interesting character that only shows up for one chapter. Interesting that he would be the king of Jerusalem. It's said, I can't remember if this is in the Bible or not, that he is taken up into heaven and not killed. I'm not sure, but yeah. Yeah, David, it's kind of movie time, but we can take this, if you have any questions or comments or anywhere to direct this, we can go anywhere. You are the resident atheistic, after all, which is funny. That's David claims to be atheistic, which I'd like to hear.
What the fuck is that?
Exactly. I think it's just a joke, but it's funny.
You mean an agnostic atheist?
It's something like that. Yeah.
But before we look at the unique identity of this king, you need to hear what Melchizedek says to Abram. Blessed be God the Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hands. This explains how Abram was able to defeat 4 powerful kings with the help of just a few hundred shepherds. From the very beginning in Mesopotamia, Abram chose to have the faith to follow God. Just like God called Abram to follow him, God is calling you to have the faith to follow him too. The crazy part is that at this point in the story, Abram has yet to encounter his biggest test of faith by far. And what's even more crazy is it's going to happen near the same city King Melchizedek rules. You'll see why that's important in a moment. But now let's get back to our mystery man. Melchizedek is not like the other kings in Canaan who worship many gods. He's a priest of the one true God. A priest is someone who helps mediate the relationship between God and the people he's created. What's even more strange is Abram gives Melchizedek 1/10 of all he owns. Why does he do that? Take a quick look at this verse in the book of Hebrews. And it is yet far more evident in the likeness of Melchizedek, there arises another priest who has come not according to the law of a fleshly commandment, but according to the power of an endless life. The Bible is saying that our mystery man is a representation of Jesus Christ, who is the ultimate king and priest worthy of worship. Some scholars even argue that Melchizedek is an early appearance of Jesus Christ himself. After this great victory and blessing from this great king, Abram started to return home to Mamre. But there was something on his mind that had been bothering him since he left Ur years ago. Suddenly, God interrupted Abram's thoughts and said, "Don't be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great." But Abram responded, "But who will I pass my reward to when I die? My wife Sarai still isn't able to have kids." What God told Abram must have absolutely shocked him. He told Abram...
Okay, well, quickly before we get off the Melchizedek. So we have, Marshall. Why can't we have base names like Melchizedek? I want to be named something cool like Anaximander or some shit. Totally.
Anaximander.
Yeah. I do sort of miss the ancient naming scheme. It seems so cool. Maybe they only seem cool to us now because it's like, so maybe it was like totally normal to be named like, Salamandius the Great or whatever the hell. Yeah, I do miss that. And on the point of Melchizedek, the reason I'm not totally convinced that this is a pre-incarnate Christ is just the way he's described as a earthly king and a priest. And so I think perhaps a better way of reading it, or at least how I read it, is that Melchizedek could be a valid type of Christ. So typology is when you compare like characters in the Bible, in the Old Testament, to other characters in the New Testament. So Adam is the type of Christ from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and Eve is the type of Mary. So it's possible that Melchizedek is another type of Christ, sort of like a mirror or someone to compare to Christ, but isn't literally Jesus. That's kind of how I interpret that. But I'm sure there's an interesting argument for why he could be the pre-incarnate second person of the Trinity. Biblical names do sound cool. Welcome, Numenon. Welcome, brother. Any questions, any history points or questions or ways to take the conversation, just drop them in the chat. Feel free to join that Discord, and we'll continue.
To look up at the sky. Your descendants will be more numerous than all the stars you can see. But that wasn't the only promise God made to Abram. And to show how serious God was about this next promise, he cut multiple animals in half, as was customary in that culture when someone wanted to make a big promise. And God passed through the sacrificed animals to demonstrate that he was swearing by his own name. Then he put Abram to sleep and showed him the future. Abram's descendants would become slaves in a foreign land for 400 years, but God would punish that nation and bring Abram's descendants back into the land of Canaan. Then God made one of his biggest promises yet. He said that the land from the Nile River in Egypt all the way to the Euphrates River would all be given to Abram's descendants. Now that Abram had received such a massive promise, he must have told his barren wife, because she came up with an idea to help God out. Since she couldn't have kids, she asked Abram if he would be willing to have a child with her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar. Sarai thought maybe this way Abram and her could sort of have a child together. So Abram decided to take one for the team and do it. So brave. The result was Hagar's son Ishmael, and a whole lot of jealousy from Sarai, as you could imagine. But this wasn't God's plan. In fact, God told Abram that Sarai was going to have a son even though she was 90 years old. And it's at this point that Abram gets his name changed to Abraham, meaning father of a multitude. God even changed Sarai's name to Sarah, meaning princess. But before their promised son is born, one of the most insane stories in the entire Bible takes place. Remember Lot and his family living in the luxurious city of Sodom? Well, things are about to get pretty ugly in paradise. And it all starts with 3 men visiting Abraham at his campsite in Mamre. Except they're not men. 2 of them are angels, and get this, one of them is God himself. Even though they look like men, Abraham knows better. He bows before God and makes him and the angels the best cut of steak he has, and they eat it. I guess God's not vegetarian. After they eat, God promises Abraham again that Sarah will have a son. Then the 2 angelic men dismiss themselves from the feast and begin to walk towards Sodom. Abraham's probably thinking, cool, my nephew Lot will get a chance to meet real angels. But God has some bad news to share with Abraham. The citizens of Sodom have hurt so many people. I have no choice but to destroy that evil city. Probably because he was concerned for his nephew, Abram tried to bargain with God. And as a result, God agreed to not destroy the city if there were 10 good people found in Sodom. With this agreement in mind, God departed from Abram and made his way toward Lot. But meanwhile, a mob was forming in Sodom, around Lot's house. The people of Sodom wanted to hurt the angels who had just arrived at Lot's house, but Lot wouldn't let the people in. Instead, he does something so horrible. I believe it is one of the most depressing passages in the entire Bible. Lot offers his daughters to be hurt by the evil men of Sodom instead. This really shows just how depraved mankind can become. But God's angels didn't let it happen. They struck the angry mob with blindness, and by God's grace, pulled Lot and his family out of the city because God had just arrived and he wasn't happy with Sodom or her neighboring city Gomorrah. Lot and his family were allowed to flee to Zoar and were told to never look back. But as they do this, the Bible records one of the strangest verses in all of Scripture. Then the Lord rained fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heaven.
This is one of the main bases for why it's said that the pre-incarnate Jesus is the angel of the Lord that comes to Abraham here, because the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of heaven. So it's just one of those instances where we see the Trinity popping up in the Old Testament. And you could say, well, maybe it means whatever, from himself or whatever, but that's not an intuitive way to write that. Another interesting point about this story is that Abraham gets to, like, not debate, but like he gets to sort of plead with God and works down that number. So at first Abraham starts like, if there are 50 good people, will you save the city? And God goes, yeah, sure, if there are 50 good people. And he goes, well, what about if there's 20? And then God goes, okay, yeah, even if there's 20. Abraham says, okay, one more, please, if there's 10. And so like it theologically, it represents this relationship that we have with God. It's not just like he's telling us exactly how it's going to be, you know, in this sort of prescriptive, like totally authoritarian way. There's room for us to talk with God and plead with him and, you know, sort of come to compromise in some way. Like the human part of the relationship with God is important. It is valuable. It is valid. So we got some chats here. Yeah, I'll put... Have you seen the recent debate Jay Dyer had with Not So Erudite? Yeah, I actually did watch pretty much all of it. It was really interesting. I do think Jay Dyer crushed her. She was good, though. I mean, she seems like a decent debater. She got stuck on a couple points. Maybe we could even look at some of that, because it was an interesting debate for sure. Well, we have no reason or evidence to think that the laws of nature and time, etc., have changed, except for perhaps the fact that they started at some point, which would be a change from not existing to existing, but fair enough.
I don't think there's any evidence of that, though.
I think you can give a philosophical evidence for the impossibility of a infinite regressive past, which would say that these things
I've never seen it done, though.
Well, we could do that. So the quick analogy for why an infinite regressive past is not possible is that how would you jump out of a hole that has no bottom?
Yeah, well, if you divide up an arrow moving infinitely, it eventually can't move at all. However,
yes,
it does move. So from whatever force we can't understand, if we infinitely do something, things can still happen.
Except that with the arrow thing, and I wish I was a better philosopher to be able to address that point exactly, but my understanding of the arrow moving is that there's no infinity of like material, like, I don't know, points along the path of the arrow. That's just an arbitrary sort of division that you're making of the arrow's path or something like that. Like, there's not a materially infinite path that the arrow takes. It takes a defined set path, like starting from point A and ending at point B. And sure, you can divide.
Wouldn't you define that as non-existence and existence, though?
What do you mean?
You could define that as existence and non-existence, and it still happens under the model of creation.
But under that analogy, there would have to be a point A and a point B.
That's what I'm saying. Point A is just non-existence.
Oh, but so then so point B is existence?
Yeah, I'm saying under that view, you could make that argument.
So then there would
exist. So you could make the argument.
Then there would be a change from things not existing to existing. Anyway, okay, so
if you take that view,
yeah. I have similar thoughts as well. Show me that Jay is good at rhetorically imbalancing his enemies, while Erudite is good at maintaining composure. Yeah, she was very well composed, especially because Jay Dyer gets a little, he gets a little, I don't know, hard to deal with. Maybe is a good way of putting it, but Coherence is specifically a great way to respond to the trilemma. I was a little frustrated how they just kept insulting each other, but the Agrippa stuff was really interesting. Yeah, they definitely got into an insult battle. All right, David. Yeah, good luck, brother. God bless you. Have a good afternoon. Well, thank you for joining and having your input. So I'm getting called based, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I appreciate it. I'll always accept that compliment. I think Kant had the best proof for a finite past, but he also tried to prove that time couldn't have a beginning like around the same passage. Oh, okay. That's interesting. His argument was that if there was an infinite amount of past events, then we would have gone through an infinity of events, right? Basically, he argued that it would be exhausting the inexhaustible. Yeah, right? I mean, that's basically the argument. That's the idea behind the jumping out of a hole with no bottom, that you would be exhausting the inexhaustible to come to any, like, particular
But there are even
time.
philosophical realities for stuff like this. Like, for instance, the fact that 1.9 reoccurring equals 1. Like, there's a philosophical reason for that.
Okay, I'm not sure I know the philosophical reason for that, other than just if it's just...
Well, I mean, mathematics is philosophy.
Yeah. So if 1.9 repeating just equals 2, then...
No, 1.
1.999 repeating equals 1.
Oh, you said 1.9. I said...
Oh,
I said
0.9. Okay.
0.9.
Okay, so if 0.9999 equals 1, it seems like that's more of a concession to our limited ability to, like,
No,
use
I
an
thought that
infinite.
too, but, like, literally when you calculate it, it equals out to 1. It doesn't round, it doesn't do anything, it just equals 1.
But only because we prescribed that, right? Or no? Like,
I
that's
mean,
not
you give
actually...
it to a computer and it tries to do it, and it always rounds it up to 1.
Right, because even a computer is not infinite.
Right, but we're not telling it to round 1.
Okay. Fair enough.
It seems like it's just a reality that reoccurrences and, like, infinities can equal their greater parts. Like, you have it with the philosophical, like, division of the arrow. You have it with the mathematical proof of how a reoccurrence equals to its whole. Like, it seems like this can happen.
Yeah, it just seems like it can't happen in actuality. It can only happen in, like, thought or something.
Right, but who's to say that this isn't the same thing? That's why I'm saying there's no proof of it. I'm not saying that the infinite reoccurrence did happen, but, like, it's not like it's been demonstrated to not able. It's, like, not physically able to happen. Because, like, philosophically, just like the past thing, the whole thing, you can divide down time an infinite amount, but the arrow still flies, right? Yet the universe is still here.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering if we even can divide the arrow's path infinitely, just because we're limited to be able.
Well, I'm saying in, like, a thought experiment.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same with the infinite regress thing. It's a thought experiment. It's not like we're not actually going back in time.
Yeah, no, I get that. It still doesn't feel like there can be any, like, actual real infinity of things. You know what I mean? Like, material infinity of things, even time.
Yeah, who knows?
But yeah, I guess who knows at a certain point. But, like, even when we say the arrow thing, or we say 0.9999999 repeating equals 1, we're conceding something, and what we're conceding is the law of identity, or not conceding, but just giving up. So, like, obviously 0.999 repeating is not
just saying
identical to 1,
themselves.
but we just call it 1. That's not that it actually
Jesus
is
isn't equal to God, and yet we call him God. Like,
okay, fair enough. All right. So the base comment was referring to the fact that I watched the Jay Dyer debate. Yeah, that is probably one of my more based qualities on the internet. So I would also like to say that Infamous would be a good debater, as he infuses tenacity and persistence into his objections. He would be a monster in the debate brosphere if he improved his rhetoric.
I was a monster in the debate brosphere, and I didn't have any problems with my rhetoric.
Okay, fair enough. The main problem Kant had with an infinite amount of past events is how you could never have gone... That was the Martial Esotericist.
Fair enough.
is how you could never have gone through all of them. Otherwise, I'm not sure why infinities would be problematic, but notions of having gone through an infinite seem problematic. Yeah, I just don't see... Yeah, I agree with Kant, with at least that claim by Kant. That,
They do seem problematic. I'll concede that.
Yeah, and it just seems like you just... How would... Like, realistically, so there's an infinite amount of time, so there's an infinite amount of hours... or whatever, an infinite amount of minutes.
If I plop you inside of an infinite amount of jelly, would you still move through the jelly?
Interesting.
Like, if I plop you inside the middle of an infinite anything, you're gonna move. The infinity does have properties that can be interacted with by whatever, right?
Well, I'm not sure.
Who's to say that it can't even... Go on.
Well, one, I wouldn't think that an infinite jelly could actually exist, but...
well, I'm saying given the idea that there is an infinite regress in universe, like... Well, I'm saying given that the idea... That, I mean, again, it's a thought experiment. You can't really get any infinite... But, like, let's say there is an infinite thing, right? Okay. And we exist inside that infinite thing as a property of its expression, right? Okay. Which is really what an infinite regress is saying, right? So, like, we are just life that exists inside of an infinite... material thing, let's say time began, right? Can you move inside that material thing?
Yeah, the material thing, which by definition is finite. So, like, if we're in this infinity...
No, I'm saying it's infinite. I'm saying that there's infinite space.
But the time is not infinite, right?
Sure. Could you move inside the infinite space?
Given no time? Or given infinite time?
No, not time. Just given time. I'm saying that there's no unique distinction between time and space to say that while I can move through space, I can't move through time if one is infinite.
I still think you have the problem of transversal, like, because okay, so this is my thing. So there's an infinite number, specifically just bring it back to time specifically, so, and why it might be different than space. So if there's an infinite number of hours in whatever history, then that means that the point that we're at in history right now, we have as finites, like, particular things that are here right now.
But we're not. We are part of the infinite. Like, that's the thing, is that there's...
But you admit that you yourself are not infinite. Your experience is not infinite.
No. I'm not saying that my experience is infinite. I'm not saying that the individual is infinite. Again, it's like dividing... It's like I'm taking 1.1... Like, it's like I'm taking 0.00001 away from the infinity. It's no longer infinity now, right? Yeah. I've dissected it. I've taken a bit of it that literally separates it from itself. We are a part of it. Like, we are... It sounds like the hippy-dippy shit. We are everything, right? Everything is the set of all things, right? If we're saying that time is infinite, that's everything, right? Time affects everything. It affects all space-time matter. It's all lumped into one thing. It's reality. And if it's infinite, because time is infinite and it affects everything, we're a part of that. We're an expression of the infinity. It's not like we exist separate from it. We're part of it.
Okay.
So it's not like, you know, we're instantiating our limited thing inside of an infinite thing.
How does this do away with the problem that in order to be...
I was just clarifying. I wasn't saying it solves anything.
Okay. So the problem, to be clear, is that if there are an infinite number of hours behind us in time, then how did that infinity get traversed? That's the phrase that Kant uses, which is
how do you traverse an infinite sea?
How do you exhaust the inexhaustible?
Why are we exhausting it?
Because we're here right now. There's a future and a past.
Yeah, but there's a back and a front and an infinite sea. We can still move through it. There's no contradiction.
But you don't get any. So, like, if there were a present moment, so you're at, like, you know, it becomes meaningless. But say you're at point A within this infinite sea.
Infinity, sure. Yeah.
And you're saying, how do I get to point B, which is like where we're at right now, say within that infinite sea?
The point that Kant has is dragging out infinity, right? It's like an infinite expanse, right? That's kind of how Kant views it. It's like, how do I get from point A to point B when point B is being infinitely stretched away from me, right? You
Yeah.
can't get there,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
But that's not the
yeah.
view of infinity that all infinities take. For instance, a static infinity, like the one that I'm not necessarily proposing, but I can work within, is it is infinite. The distance is infinite, but
Yeah.
there are points along the infinity, right? One is made
Yeah.
up of infinite numbers, but
Yeah.
0.999999 does exist, right? Within that set of numbers. It just has infinite numbers. That doesn't mean there isn't milestones. That doesn't mean you can't get to them.
Okay. Okay.
Again, the arrow situation.
Yeah, and so for the arrow, it's like we can divide things infinitely, but you can't like add things infinitely. You see what I mean? Like you can't step forward infinitely. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but here's the thing: is that you can step forward infinitely. What's the problem with that?
That you would never get anywhere, I guess.
Well,
like,
you would by definition. You're stepping forward.
but
Like, this is the thing I've never
maybe.
understood about an infinite regress. Like, there's so many presumptions and, like, you know, like, oh, well, if it's an infinite amount of space, what's the, like, space and time are not very different at all, really,
No,
right?
they're-
One
yeah,
is just a different expression of another, right? But, like, what's the real difference that makes it so that I can traverse in an infinite space perfectly fine in, like, in the abstract sense, right? Like, for instance, I'm at I'm at the spawn location, and there's infinite directions everywhere, and I can move, I just won't get to the end of anything. Right? What's the difference between that and time?
It just
it's
I understand. It just seems that every present moment is the end of time as we know it. Like that we've gotten to.
Well, I agree that it might be our experience, but like at the same time, I feel like that's a misuse of the analogy, right? Because in the infinite space analogy, every step is the end of that step, but I'm still in the distance. I'm still in the infinity.
Yeah, but all you've traversed is something finite, which is what I'm saying. So all that we have traversed must be something finite, and that is where it comes into time. So like there might be, I believe there is an infinite there is an infinite substrate from which is God, right?
Yeah, you think it's God, right? Which is confusing as to why.
But he instantiated finitude, which allows for something like time to even be traversable.
Right, but you think. But that's the thing, is that the instantiation of it, we don't know how that needs to happen or if it needs to happen.
No, you're
that's
right.
My thing.
You're
so
right.
you think it can happen, right? You believe in an infinite progress, just not an infinite regress. Actually, no, you do believe in an infinite regress. You think God is eternal. He exists at all times, at all places, even separate from time.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have no problem with an infinite regress, or you at least think that God's
I have no problem. I have
that.
no problem with like an immaterial infinite regress. But we're talking about something material, which is time and space. So.
Well, time isn't material, by definition.
I mean,
it affects the material
relative to maybe. Okay.
It affects the material, but there's no actual
Yeah, like material unit.
I can't grab time and check
you can't. Yeah. I get that. Okay, it's interesting. All good stuff to think about. I'll let you in, Henry. Don't worry. Let me just read some of these. So to be clear, my problem isn't with infinites or how counterintuitive they are. It's with how you could never go through an infinite, as there would always be more events to go through before. Yeah, I think we're kind of fleshing that out.
But like, what if there's an infinite progress, right? There's still infinite events for you to go through. You just never reach the end. The same way that if you were to go backwards in time, you'd never reach the beginning. Like, just because you can't reach the end point and the beginning point doesn't mean that you can't reach points along the journey, right? If you know,
yeah, the question is just how did the journey start? So what made?
But that doesn't even make sense.
Well, you have to spawn. Given this like analogy, you have to spawn somewhere within this like context of infinity. So you're starting somewhere, like you're starting somewhere, and so that would be then the question of why is there something rather than nothing, or how do we become creative?
Yeah, at that point when we're talking about the discussion
out of infinity into finitude, that to me would require a personal agent.
But you're talking about finitude again. You know what I mean? Like what is that? Like we're part of the infinite thing. We're points along it, right? Like we are part of it.
Yeah.
Like we're not separate. Like, do you believe, for instance, let's literally use God, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that you think that you are separate from God, other than the fact that you aren't embodying Him right now. Like, you think everything exists in the mind of God, right? God knows everything.
Well, I think there is a separation between like me and anything in existence.
Yeah, but it's arbitrary to God, right? Like the reason that he made creation is arbitrary. Like he could have done anything he wanted, but he chose to do that. That's the point of the whole like salvation and beauty of it, right?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the salvation and the love and all that is the point. But I understand what you're saying. It's not like he needed to do that.
Yeah, and so we're an expression of his infinity. So is
we're the
Lucifer.
finite,
so is everything. Yeah.
But we're the finite expression of infinity. So we just do the best we can.
Right. Expressions of infinity, when measured, can be finite, but the totality of God is reality.
Right. Yes.
Like that's the point,
that's
right?
the reality,
Without God, we cease to exist. Sin ceases to exist. Everything ceases to exist.
Yeah. He's the animating force of everything.
Yeah, he's the animating force, right? And so if you view it like that everything is that one unit, right? And that our arbitrary existence, while like when we're scalpeled out and measured, isn't infinity, doesn't mean that the infinity doesn't exist.
No, I get that. Numenon says infinite progress and infinite regress are far different in my view. Within one, you can keep going, and within the other, you have gone through something that's infinite, which is to me counterintuitive. But so. All right, Henry. I
guess I don't see.
Henry's like literally flipping out here. This is he's on one today, so we'll see what this is. Everyone, just prepare yourself. All right, what's up? What's up, Hen? You got anything for us here today on this point?
I'm gonna need you to look outside your window, Reese.
Why is that, brother? Why is that?
I was just like driving around, and I was like, I thought I'd say what's up.
Oh, what's up, brother? What's up? Welcome. What do you think? Do you think that we exist? There's an infinite regress, or do you think we live?
Which way are you? Do you see me? Do you see me?
I don't see. Are you on my street? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, look outside your window.
I don't see you. And I'm not gonna spend too much time looking, but no, I don't.
I'm on the sidewalk.
Okay, good. Well, enjoy yourself, brother. Feel free to come.
I was driving around. I was like, oh, by Reese, so I thought I'd pull up. I don't know. I just moved into the new place.
You can. Oh, nice, fun. Okay, you can pull up. You can come on up if you want. We're gonna keep streaming though, so you have to be.
No, it's chill. You're doing stuff. I'm doing stuff. We're all doing stuff. So talk to me about infinity. Tell me about this.
Well, what's your intuition? Do you think that it's possible that we live in this sort of like new age hippy dippy like infinite?
I mean, are you kind of getting at like the idea of the universe being infinite? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, like an infinite multiverse,
like
or just like that, or maybe like the Mayan thing that time like loops on itself and like repeats and stuff like that.
I mean, I was always fascinated just because I read comic books by the idea that everything on our Earth and in our universe vibrates at a certain frequency, and that if certain things vibrate at a different frequency, they wouldn't be able to exist in the same space and time in a multiversal realm. I always thought that was very interesting, and like, I don't know, a lot of comics in that way, it's like based on real science in many ways. You know?
Yeah.
I feel like to some degree, I always like think about it because like the idea of a multiverse, I would never say that I fully believe in it, but I would never say that it's like ridiculous. You know, like I think it's very possible that there are Earths taking up the same space as our Earth that vibrate at a different frequency to us.
Right, like it's a different dimension or something like that.
Yeah.
I could see that. I think that does present the
I'm not
problem of having.
enough to explain the
Yeah. No, totally. And I don't think
it's like an expression of time or other dimensions that affect space. Like for instance, like if the dimension of spaces that we have like existed inside of like a tesseract, you know, from like Avengers or whatever, we're technically the same object that it exists in the same space or the same square, but like one is very clearly different. Like
yeah, and so that is interesting.
And also time, I guess if one was like time, you could exist in the same like amount of seconds, but be in a separate space, and you'd essentially be the same thing. But
I think by its definition, infinity is something that is really just like hard for us to grasp. And even if we try to have a conversation about it, it's one of those things where it's like, it's just like, it's not something we can really pretend to understand. We can have the best grasp of it as we possibly can.
Totally. Yeah, I think we're just trying to do the best we can here. I'm not presuming to have any like special knowledge about the nature of infinity or anything.
How does this relate to God for you?
Well, because we're talking about so this relates particularly to the fine-tuning argument, but also to the claims made in Genesis. So one answer by the materialist or the naturalist to why the universe we live in appears to be so perfectly tuned for existence is
For existence?
is
Okay, that's a better argument than life.
yeah. I mean, you could take it down the line to life, but you don't need to at all, because the low entropy state at the beginning of the universe is what allows like atoms and molecules to accrete together to form matter in general. So, and that is the highest number in the fine-tuning argument by a factor of, I don't even know what the factor is.
So
but
do you
by a
think
lot.
we're alone in the universe?
No, not per se.
it's
I don't
yeah.
think we're locked into that at all, to being alone in the universe. I would actually expect there to be lots of life in the universe. Given
Warhammer 40K's
God's
definition
nature.
is you weren't made in the image of God.
Yeah,
That's my thing with the fine-tuning argument is I definitely feel like we know so little about outer space and shit like that. There's so much. I feel like we're definitely just like undiscovered to some degree.
yeah.
I firmly believe there is life out there. There's civilizations, bullshit, all that stuff.
There's one thing off of Joe Rogan that I liked, and I'm never gonna say that sentence again, but trust me. The conversation that like, if aliens appeared and they were just like really shit, like imagine they got here and their just ship is made of wood and they actually were like slingshotted by a giant catapult.
Yeah. That's
like they're just these unimpressive creatures, and we're just like,
oh, interesting.
Can't believe you got here.
yeah. That is a funny thought experiment. That's possible. We really don't know. Like Henry said,
we have to unfreeze them like the Scooby-Doo fucking caveman. Like
yeah, exactly. But so the importance of infinity relative to these arguments is what the naturalist or the materialist can say if in a material infinity of things or an infinity of time is possible, is that okay? There's a infinite multiverse or an infinite like sort of law of higher dimensional nature or something that sort of like pumps out universes. And if there's enough universes just being pumped out, and some of them matter can accrete, and some of them life is available, and some of them this and that, then that could explain how through natural processes we get the universe we're in now. There would have to be an infinite number of other situations being generated in order to avoid the fine tuning, because then you'd be able to say, well, it's actually not that unlikely that we live in this extremely unlikely situation, given the fact that all the other options are exhausted in some other
but
way.
that's the point, is that you can only say that it's unlikely when you have all the options. We don't.
I gotta leave. My phone battery's dying. I'm sure that you'll like that.
All right. All right. Thanks for joining, Henry. Peace. Okay, so to Numenon, I think fine-tuning isn't that good of an argument, as you could seemingly create a naturalistic explanation which explains the fine-tuning equally well, like some machine which generates life-permitting universes. Yeah, that's exactly their explanation. And now, if you think about that, exactly to Infamous's point, that is just as much a statement of like dogmatic belief as
the machine
saying
is just
God exists. Yeah, because like we simply have absolutely no. I'd say we have less evidence of that type of like universe creating machine than for God. But
it's like a little bit more if you say it's natural, because like we know natural things exist. We don't know if supernatural things exist, but like that's like the only thing. And
but this machine would be supernatural because it defines what our natural laws are, defines what our natural world looks like. So this machine also would be supernatural, which is why I think that's defeated.
Not necessarily. It could be some like kind of meta nature or something like that.
Yeah.
I think we're getting into
meta nature. Yeah, I mean, again, that's like sort of equivocation.
Basically supernatural.
Like, yeah.
No, I think it is equivocation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just doing, because Marshall Esotericus has actually asked us to define the fine-tuning argument. I think we can do it quickly and uncontroversially, and we don't have to necessarily debate about it, but we can, give some of the reasons that this is something that people use, even if it's not the best argument.
I do really find that comment where Someone was like, Infamous would be really good as a debater. I was like, funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, Infamous, that he did do a lot of debating before he joined our little family here.
Oh, it's been years. It's been years.
Yeah. Okay, so so the argument itself is that the universe, I'm going to say, a lot of people will say fine-tuned for life. I think that's less obvious.
It's weird to say
strong.
the universe is fine-tuned for existence. It's like, okay, well, that's like saying a pie is fine-tuned to be a pie. It's like,
Well, it's kind of like saying, yeah, but you would never find a pie in the middle of the woods and say, well, nobody made this.
No,
That's
I'm talking about the thing itself. I'm saying, like, you're saying, like, because, like, it's equivocation, right? Like, hey, it's come up twice now.
Well, I could be much more specific.
Existence is the universe. Like, it's kind of its
No,
existence.
I get that. So to be more specific, I could say the universe is fine-tuned for the accretion of matter, which leads to everything, say. Or for laws to sort of balance with each other before the accretion of matter. But so the argument goes, there are certain physical, natural laws and constants of nature that must be exactly what they are to an extremely minute level of detail in order for, I'm going to say, matter to accrete and therefore give us planets, stars, energy, heat, and then eventually, of course, life. So, yeah, the fine-tuning argument is
how many universes can do that?
To the martial esotericists, the fine-tuning argument is an intelligent design argument, so you probably do know it already.
I mean, it is, yeah. I mean, here's the thing, though. How many universes can do the thing you're talking about?
Well, given the infinite multiverse, there would be infinite that can, right?
I mean, I'm not even saying, like, you know, the theories or anything. Like how many can do it? Do you know?
No, I only know of one that can do it, and the specificity with which it is required to do it is X, which is what the fine-tuning argument is. It's not saying, like, you don't have to compare it to other universes. You just have to see how specific the constants and the laws have to be in order for this universe to arise. You see what I mean? And so, if you want to say, if you want to say,
like how many sides are there? You know what I mean?
I don't really see how how is that relevant?
Like, okay, if we're saying how many of X can do Y, right? It's the same as saying, like, how many sides of a die can pull up a number, right? It's a lot, right? In fact, it's all of them.
Right. Okay. But
so how many universes can create life?
Because it's not really saying that. It's more like saying we have a 10 quadrillion, rillion, gajillion, babillion sided die, and you roll that die. What are the odds?
How many of them can create life?
What are the odds it came up with any of the ones that created life, which is certainly less than the number of 4 quadrillion, blah, 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 blah.
Well,
because
how do you know that?
if
That's
we
my point about the fine-tuning argument.
If we
is
switch
how many
those
can
numbers
do the things
slightly,
you're talking about?
Not many is the answer.
How do you know that?
Because of these numbers. So
no, that's how they can do it here. How do we know how many can do it in other universes?
Well, you don't. That's why you have to. That's why you have to.
You don't. So we don't know if this universe is special or not.
Well, we do know it's special compared to the other options that it could
The same way that the number 1 on a die is special compared to the number 6, which is that it's not.
Yeah, the number even numbers or whatever, or like say like prime numbers would be a better example, is so on this like almost infinitely, approaching infinitely sided die, if you roll it, what are the odds that it's a prime number? That's more like what we're talking about. You see
like
what I mean?
Half.
Half? I mean, no.
Yeah.
Half of
it's
all.
Infinitely sided, half.
Okay. I don't even know if that actually would equal half in an infinite.
It does. There's 2 options. It's infinite, it's half.
It's what?
If there's 2 options and the options are infinite, it's half.
Okay. But like between 1 and 7, or between 1 and 10.
No, I know that there's more of 1. I'm just saying that, like, technically it's half.
Okay, fair enough. Numenon thinks I have a point. We could just remain agnostic on whether life is possible in other universes, but still try to figure out the probability of this specific type of universe existing. Yeah, which is kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't really know or care if there are other universes. I'm just saying the one we're in, how likely was that to have taken place? And it seems like there are only two options. That there's an infinite number of possible universes that are actually being generated in order to generate this universe, or somebody
Or this is the only one that can exist.
well, if this is the only one that can exist, then that would suggest that there is an intelligent designer.
No, I didn't think it would. If this is the only possible thing that can exist, why would it need a designer?
Because of the intricacy of the but because of the specificity of the numbers involved, the constants, and what we observe. So if this is the only one that can exist, then it must have been created. Because it's like it's like the classical formulation of the argument is if you found a highly, ornate and intricate watch lying in the middle of the road and you stumble upon this watch, there's no sense in which you would say, this is the only thing that could exist. It must not have been created by anything.
I need to have a... But why? But why is that the case? Because it's not its complexity. It's because we know that watches are designed.
Yes.
If a caveman came across a watch, he wouldn't have a fucking clue if it was created.
He would probably have to... He would know it's not like anything else. And
I agree. He would know it's not like
chaos.
anything else, but the minute he saw lava, he knew it wasn't like anything else.
Sure.
Right? So we
Okay.
use it by contrasting design with nature, right?
Yeah.
How many universes do we have?
So you're saying you can only make this determination if you can contrast it with some other universe, with some
Absolutely.
other nature.
You know why? You know why I know that?
Why is that?
How do you tell the difference between a universe that is created and a universe that isn't? You can't.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean that almost doesn't mean anything. How would I know between a universe that is created or it wasn't created? I wouldn't know. But if I were presented two options and one of them required an extremely specific set of laws and rules that are so specific to the... If it were off by 1 part in 10 to the 120th,
They're all specific. That's the thing.
the universe would have either collapsed back
universes
in
are
on itself
specific.
or expanded too fast for galaxies in this life form. Well, how do you know all universes are specific? We don't know any other universes.
Because they're those universes. Is this one specific?
Yes, this one is.
Is this a universe?
Sure is.
All of them are specific.
But how do you know that? Because you can't compare them to other universes.
Because that's all of them.
Oh, so you know that this is the only universe. All right, you're getting closer.
No, I know that this one is specific, and this is the only example of a universe. Therefore, all universes are specific.
So if you only have one red shirt and you know that shirt's red, then there can't be any other
there you
blue
go,
shirts.
that's red.
And that's what you're talking about. Okay.
I mean, I can't have any other conclusion that this one isn't specific.
Okay, I'm getting lost here. I don't really get the point. But you're not this does nothing to you when you read this. The cosmological constant, which governs the expansion rate of the universe, if it were different by 1 part in 10 to the 120th, the universe would have either collapsed back in on itself or expanded too fast for galaxies to form. What does that do to you in your mind? What does that make you think about?
Nothing.
Nothing.
The 6 on a die is arbitrary. Is it specific? Yeah.
So this is
It's
an arbitrary.
arbitrary.
So this is an arbitrary number. So it just randomly, like chaos produced.
Not randomly. It just is the case. Like, it's as specific as a 6-sided die.
Okay.
Like, I don't like a roll happens.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care what the source of it is, right? A roll happens.
Yeah.
What's the chances you get a 1?
Well, on a 6, 1 and 6, I guess.
1 and 6. Okay, what's the chances you get a 2?
1 and 6.
There
Et
you
cetera,
go.
et
So
cetera.
all
But
universes
in
that
this-
can be
but in this
created
case-
have the same chance to be made.
But say we use the smallest number here, so we don't multiply all the constants together. So the die is...
Why does the number matter? I feel like you're just getting mesmerized by a number.
Well, because it actually does matter.
Well, at what point do I need to make? At what point do I need to make the die so big that you're like, oh well, this one had the same chance as all the other ones?
Well, that's exactly what we're saying. So if you're the
like,
one using
what?
the analogy of the die, I wouldn't have used the analogy of the die, but because you presented it, let me just show you the
did
logical.
make the analogy of the die first, like earlier in the discussion. I brought it up again.
Yeah. I know. That's what I'm saying. You made this analogy, so let me follow the analogy to its natural conclusion. So
Yeah,
if
how
you
big
have,
does the die need to be for it to be miraculous? Even though it has to land on something.
it would be even smaller than whatever it actually is. So let me explain the analogy. What you said, if there's a die, a 6-sided die, what are the odds that you roll a 1 or a 2 or any individual number on the die? It's 1 and 6, right? Now, for the universe, the die, if we're using just the smallest number and we don't multiply any of the constants.
Let's say 1 in 1 googolplex.
Well, let's use this number, 1 followed by...
Let's make it bigger than any number that you have on your sheet. 1 in 1 googolplex.
I don't even think that's bigger than this number. 1 followed by 120 zeros. Isn't a googolplex a 1 followed by 100 zeros?
I'm pretty sure it's a million, but go on.
Oh, okay, fine. Then we'll use 1 in 1 googolplex. That's cool. Okay, so there's a die with one googolplex of sides, right?
Yeah.
Now, at least for just the first constant, the cosmological constant.
Yeah, for it to be specified in the way that the universe.
You need to
one
hit
is, sure.
a specific number. You need to hit that rate.
But this is the first step.
So the odds of that are 1 in 1 googolplex.
The first step you've made is a mistake.
Okay.
You're saying for the universe to be the specific way it is, it needed to be this specific way. And it's like, yes.
Exactly.
How many universes can make life or do any of the other things you're talking about?
A googolplex, according to this analogy, just to stay consistent, a googolplex of other universes would not create life. That's the point.
That's not true.
That is exactly what we're setting up. So there might be more than a googolplex.
No, see, this is the precondition that you're taught that you're missing, is that you're thinking that if none of these are off, if all of these are off, blah 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 blah, you can't create life.
Yes,
How the
that's
fuck
true.
Do you know that?
Because that's what the scientists tell us. Don't you say that we have to?
No, the scientist says we can't make life as we know it.
Okay.
That's the argument.
But that is what I'm talking about.
As we know it.
It doesn't.
This
Okay,
happen
fine.
as we know it. What does a universe that doesn't have these things look like? You don't fucking know.
No,
you don't have one.
but that number would be more than 1 in a googolplex because we're talking about the universe and the laws that we know. Okay, so we're multiplying all the constants.
Like the 6.
Yes, so we're multiplying all the constants. So one of the constants is 1 followed by 120 zeros, and then there's the 10 to the 39, then there's this crazy one, which is 10 to the 10 to the 123. So call it a googolplex. If any of those constants are wrong by even a single digit, then we don't get
what the universe we have.
Exactly.
What other universes can exist?
But wait, explain to me first. How does this exist? Wait, so just because you're saying, well, there might be other ones that do create life. No,
I'm not saying that there might be. I'm saying if there is other universes.
Yes.
I agree. I think you would agree, right?
Yes.
God has his choice of universes, right?
Yeah.
Does he have his choice of universes where life exists?
Yes.
Does he have his choice of universes where this number to create these things don't exist? Do you think he could create those?
Yeah, I think he could use different numbers.
Okay.
But he's a god of logic.
Life? Do you think he could create life in those?
I mean, it depends on which one he chooses, but yeah. If he's going to choose one which is capable of creating life, yeah.
Right. Cool. So, in your mind, God wants life, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say that's his only goal. What ones is he going to create?
He's going to create
only going to choose from the set that make life, right?
That is hospitable to life. Yeah, exactly.
There
That's
you go.
the fine-tuning argument. There you go. Boom.
Yeah, no,
God exists.
There
therefore.
we go. Right, we're talking about God now. However, remove God from the situation.
Okay.
Die is rolled.
Yep.
What set are we picking from in the die? Do you know? Can all universes make life? Can all universes make planets?
I can answer that. Wait, let's slow down. Let's stop. You asked, can all universes make life? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Why? Where are your other universes to confirm
Because if there were... No, I don't need another universe. I just know...
You absolutely do.
I can name you specifically one universe that cannot create life. I can actually name you...
Go ahead.
10 to the 129,999,999.
You've proven that these universes are possible and exist.
No, but I'm saying if this
There we go.
No, any universe in which the cosmological constant is 1 part in 10 to the 120th different than what it is now cannot create life. So that's
how do you
that's
know that?
10 to the 120th universe.
Possible.
No, we know that because
possible. Hold on. We don't even know if that's 1 possible. We don't know if it's 2 true, and we don't know if it's 3 impossible for life to arise from a different universe without these constants.
The third one is irrelevant. The third one is irrelevant. The second one is relevant. We do know that it's true that if it were off by 1 part in 10 to the 120th, life would not occur because the universe would have collapsed in on itself or expanded too fast for galaxies and thus life to form. So to the third point, it's irrelevant. To the second point, we do know. No, we know this. I mean, unless you want to deny science. Okay,
I'm not denying any science because we don't have any universes that aren't created. We only have the universes that we have. Right? We have the universe, our one. There is no other universe that we can investigate that don't have these constants. What does a universe look like without these constants? Describe it to me.
It collapses in on itself without just
Describe
with one
to
of
me
them.
what that is.
Nothing.
What happens to it after that?
I don't know. It just isn't what it is now.
What happens to it after that if it collapses in on itself?
Who knows? Why is that relevant?
So
How is that relevant?
You have no idea if after it collapses in on itself, what happens. For all you know, it could shit out a fucking animal right after that. Not a clue, right?
Yeah.
We have no idea what a collapsed universe looks like because we don't have one.
But we know it would. We know the universe we're in now would have collapsed. So is your view really that
we have would have collapsed? We have no idea what any other universe which is collapsed or isn't collapsed looks like.
We live in the one that. This is crazy.
We live in the one that we have. We don't live in the only one with life.
Maybe not. Maybe we do. Maybe
we
don't. You don't know. Well, I can't. That's unprovable.
Exactly. That's why the intelligent design argument for the existence of God isn't great. Because we have no other universe to compare it to.
It's not the best argument, but I don't see how you can't see how the odds of this universe being what it is are impossible, given no intelligent designer.
Because the choice had to happen. Like, that's what I'm saying, is that, like, the dice has to be cast.
Yes.
There you go. Something has to exist. We agree, because nothing can't exist.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's not a god. It's just the definition of nothing is uninstantiable, because it's not an instantiation.
Right.
Right? And even if there was nothing, the statement, there is nothing, would have to be true, therefore something would exist. The laws of logic.
Yep.
So, something must exist. That's the die being cast.
Yes.
How many choices on the die can create life? Do you have any idea?
I know how many can't.
How many? Okay, but again, what happens after the universe collapsed in on itself? Tell me what happens.
Then it would either collapse into total, I don't know, chaos or whatever. Again, nothing. I can't say scientific. No, not nothing. Not saying that.
Right, so what happens? Because you're saying these can't create life.
It would be a universe inhospitable to life would happen. Whatever that is.
How do you know? Okay, so you've scientifically defined what a collapsed universe would do after it's collapsed.
Well, I don't know.
You should get a Nobel Prize.
I don't know, nor do I have to know what happens in a universe that collapses.
You have to absolutely have to know for the claim that they cannot create life, and 2, we are unique in the way that we can create life. If you have no idea what any other universe can, even with this specific example, then what's the point of the example?
I'm not claiming that we're unique. I'm not claiming anything. I'm just saying that this universe is intelligently designed. That's the argument. So I don't know what you're talking about, other universes or this or that. No, based on the fact that if the laws were not exactly what they were, it would be, I guess maybe that's what you mean by unique. That we would have a completely untenable situation, but that doesn't have to be unique.
But there you go again. You were going to have a completely untenable situation. What does that mean? What happens in that situation? What happens in a collapsed universe? You have no idea.
Okay.
You have 0 clues. So they could all be able to create life after the collapse.
No.
And you have no idea.
certainly not.
How do you know this? How do you know
Because
this?
okay, so I can tell you exactly, like the way that you said I can write a better Bible by just taking one word and adding it to the Bible, and then it would be a better Bible.
I mean, I could
if I just
no slavery. There you go.
If I literally say I know you think that, but that's false. But anyway, so because that would not whatever. We're not getting back into that right now. If you said, how do I know that life would not be able to exist if this cosmological constant were any different? Because if it were any different, then it would collapse, or expand too fast for life to form. Okay, boom.
Okay,
then you say,
for those
then you say, wait, hold on.
What happens afterwards? What happens after?
That's what I'm about to answer. Let me. Okay, so the universe collapses, and then something happens. Is another universe form? Either it's an eternal state of like chaos,
I have not an idea.
like galaxies.
I don't have a clue.
Exactly, but you know that life
so
can't. But you know that life can't form. You don't know what it's like, but you know that life can't form.
You're just saying that.
Oh my god.
I have no idea.
So if the universe is in a state of collapse, then life can form. That's what you're contending right now.
I asked about after. I didn't see during.
Okay, so then after, if it creates a new universe that has the right constant,
I'm not saying
then
it creates
life
a new universe.
can.
I'm saying what happens. I'm saying what happens afterwards. I'm not saying it creates a new universe. I'm not saying anything about the possibilities about it afterwards. I'm asking you, because you're making the claim that it cannot create life.
Yes.
What happens after it's collapsed? And please don't use something like, oh, it's chaotic or untenable.
Okay, fine.
Give me exactly
I have to ask
happens.
a question, though. So after the universe collapses, is the cosmological constant the same as when it collapsed?
I have no clue.
So how can I answer this question? It's like a
you
meaningless
can't.
question.
That's the point. You literally have no idea what the properties are after the collapse, so you can't make any determination of it. Zero. You have no evidence of anything that happens after the fact. The theories break down. There is no space. There is no time. You have no idea what happens after the fact that there is no space and no time, or if there is no space and no time. You have zero idea. All of us do. We're not theoretical physicists, so we can't make any dependent idea about whether or not life or any planet or any galaxy or any sun could be created after this event. No idea.
Okay. Fair enough. So this is just not moving to you. These numbers mean nothing to you. They mean it's not important.
It's just the chance that any event is given to have taken place.
Right.
That's it.
And that is what we're talking about. The chance of the events that took place to instantiate the living Christ coming to earth, dying and resurrecting for our sins. Right. No, because that's the story, right? That is the main point of the story, is the salvation of all souls, right? The defeat of good over evil, okay? And so that requires certain things to be the case. For instance, life. For instance, matter accreting, things like that. So the chance of matter accreting is X. It's whatever it is. One in a Google Plex. That's the intelligent design.
We've already said that isn't true, because I asked you the hypothetical whether or not he could create a universe without these constants and still create life, and then you said yes, and therefore he could still do all of things.
Okay. Fine, but I'm just talking about the universe we have, what we can look at.
Okay, well, if we're talking about what we have and not what we haven't got, we're not using your number. Because the only way that you contrast any chance for existence or uniqueness is by contrasting it with other things.
With other hypothetical things, yeah.
Sure. And we have no information about those hypothetical things.
All right. So you just refuse to make any claim about what would happen if the universe was the cosmological constant was completely different and everything else was exactly the same. You just think, maybe it would be the same. Maybe it would be the exact same universe. Maybe would there be life and there'd be matter and there'd be planets and stars.
It sounds to me like you want. It sounds to me like you really want to say that these other things are just chaotic, can't create life, etc., etc., etc. But you can't back up those claims because you don't know what they are. You have zero idea. The smartest people on the planet have zero idea. So what right do you have to make any determination?
Wait. If the smartest people on the planet have zero idea, then why did they do all this math and science to figure this out? Like, what was the point of all that? Are you saying this? By saying this, you're saying this number is meaningless. Like they could have come up with any number.
It's meaningless to your argument. It's meaningless to your argument. It's not meaningless in the pursuit of it.
Well, then what does it mean?
Well,
just tell me, what does it mean that the cosmological constant, if it were off by 1 part in 10 to the 120th, the universe would either collapse in on itself or expand faster?
It means exactly what it says.
And what does that?
Your argument.
And what does that say? What does that mean?
What you just said.
Well, no, I want to hear it because I don't think you understand. please explain to me the words I
It
said, because I
has
don't.
X chance to happen, and if it didn't happen, these things couldn't happen.
Right.
There you go.
So what? Wait, sorry. What couldn't happen?
Like the accretion of matter,
Yeah.
like forming galaxies.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think I don't understand what you said? Like, I don't know.
I'm
like,
kind
I feel like
of,
you don't think
because-
I'm responding to you.
Yeah, you've been responding, but it seems like you've been missing the point that there is a
No, I feel like
genuine
I'm not- I feel like I don't
possibility
give.
of
I feel like
another
you-
universe that doesn't
Yeah, but
create
you're thinking
life.
that these accretions of matter, et cetera, are so highly specified for the creation of life, etc.
Yes.
But those are like presuppositions. Like you.
No, it's not.
First of
Why
all,
the
it
atheist
is because
scientists
I
are the
asked
ones
you.
that say
I
this.
asked you if God could do it without those, and you said yes. It is absolutely a precondition for them. So
Okay.
what? So if you have no information about the universe after the fact, no scientist does. I'm not saying that they shouldn't strive to, which seems to be your whole thing about, like, you're saying these are meaningless, right? The idea that I swim on Saturdays is meaningless to this argument the same way these numbers are, right?
No. Okay.
Yes.
Keep going.
Like, so if you have no information about any other universe, even with this hypothetical number, these hypothetical universes after collapse, if after is even a sense of it even makes sense, then
So
what determination can you make of this universe?
Can I ask you?
You need
what,
something to astronauts to do.
Can I ask you what you think the scientist who discovered the cosmological constant was saying when he made this discovery?
He was saying that it's highly specified for the creation of those things.
Right. So I'm just taking.
So, like, for instance,
analysis.
if the number was a little bit different,
Yes.
then this thing wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
It's not for your argument. It's just the case. I'm not like the idea that a puddle couldn't have formed if this hole was here. Like, so the fact that this couldn't have happened if it didn't happen. So I don't.
Okay. You're just not moved by the argument, but the argument isn't invalid.
It absolutely is if we're talking about logic. We're just saying this moves me very much. Then sure, whatever. I can make any argument to anyone and move them.
No.
Like, you
but
know, like, it doesn't
I'm
matter.
saying, when I say meaningless, I'm not saying it's meaningless that you bring this up. I'm not trying to, like, discredit you or, like, your interpretation of this data. But I'm saying if you say
no,
that
I know you're saying this. You're saying the data is meaningless. I didn't take any personal attack to it.
No, I know.
I'm saying that. I'm
Yeah,
saying
so-
that it is meaningless in regards to your
No, not just the
argument.
data.
You're using the data
conclusion.
for
No,
the
you're
argument.
saying the conclusion is meaningless because if the
No, the
universe
conclusion
collapsed.
is interesting. I'm sure.
Well, you said if the universe collapsed or it expanded too fast for galaxies, yada yada yada, for life to form, then
be true during those
maybe
times, sure.
life would have formed anyway. But that's not what the data tell. That's not the conclusion of the data. that we
First of all,
find.
there is no data. Second of all,
There is
I mean,
data.
it's not no, it's
There is
theoretical
data.
physics. There's no data.
I'm not sure how
We haven't not
exactly
got
people.
any.
So
we
theoretical
haven't got
physics
any
is just
data.
philosophy. There's no data.
First of all, mathematics is data. Theoretical physics is a
Yeah.
set of
It's
mathematics that has to
based
line up
off
with
of-
the physics of the universe.
Yeah,
So the
right.
data is
Which is
irrelevant
math at
until
the end
you.
of the day.
The data is irrelevant when we're talking about theoretics. We have to make it line up with the actual data. The theoretics have no data. Like when we're talking about potential universes, this is theoretic. Like, we're not talking
this
about
is-
anything we ever have data on.
I'm not sure this is theoretical. The cosmological constant is a term in Einstein's field equations of general relativity that represents the energy density of an empty space, also known as dark energy. The discovery and confirmation of the cosmological constant as a real physical feature of our universe comes from several independent lines
There's the
of
data point, yeah.
observational evidence, that's the data,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
converging around the idea that the universe's expansion is accelerating. Here are the key
Yeah,
types of
and
data,
the
and there's
number,
tons.
the number in the thing
So-
is theoretic. So for instance, right? Name me a theory, a theoretic model in theoretical physics. Name me one.
I don't even know any. I don't know. Like
one point- at
general
one point it was,
relativity, maybe. Like I don't. Is that
Sure,
one?
general relativity, right?
Yeah, sure.
The numbers aren't data, right? The idea.
Yeah.
isn't
I
data.
wasn't saying that.
But
I'm saying.
but the
that
reality that we're corresponding
Yes.
it to, that it has to line up with everything
Is the
else.
data.
Those are data points.
that's what I was
When we're
referring
talking
to.
about
I wasn't referring to
hypothetical
the number
universes-
as data. I was not referring to the number
Yeah,
as data. I was
okay,
referring to
okay.
how they came to this number. They experimented using the scientific method, using
What did they experiment?
observing data. Well, we can see.
What did
First,
they,
direct evidence for cosmic acceleration. Type les supernovae are used
Redshifting,
as
yeah.
standard candles to measure cosmic distances. Observations from the Supernova Cosmology Project and the High Z Supernova Search Team show that distant supernovae were dimmer than expected if the universe were decelerating, which was the expectation before. This implies the universe expansion is accelerating, consistent with a positive cosmological constant. So that's one of the first bits of observation empirical data that they collected, said, this is weird, let's look into this. The CMB anisotropy patterns are affected by the geometry and composition of the universe. The angular power spectrum reveals that the universe is spatially flat. To match observed flatness, given the observed matter density, approximately 30%, the remaining 70% must be from dark energy, consistent with the cosmological constant. The Planck satellite provided high-precision data showing these numbers to be the case, I guess. I don't know. There are periodic fluctuations in the density of the visible baryonic matter of the universe. So, yeah, there's just tons of data to say that this constant must be what it is.
Again, the observations and then the correlations between other observations are data points.
That's the data.
The theories around them are not.
Okay. I agree with that. But the question is, how do they make those theories? So I agree that science is never the theories are not. That's why we call them theories, I guess. I don't really know, but the theories are not these like
the definition in scientific theory isn't the same thing, but sure.
Right. So I'm with you. I understand that the number that I presented is not the data itself, but the number that we associate with the conclusions.
Sure, that's fine. That was my misconception. We can move on from that.
Presented. Okay. All right. So cool. Let's see. It looks like we got some action here. Possible it doesn't seem to contradict what we know about reality. I think whether other type of life could have come about is irrelevant, as we were asking about the probability of this type of life existing. Fair enough. We talked about that.
Are we, though? That's the thing. We also don't know how many universes can create this type of life. I guess you would have to say that the accretion matters at that point.
Yes. I mean, to create this type of life, there has to be matter, there has to be, whatever, life in general has to be possible.
But even then, that's the thing, is that, like, we don't know what happens after these, like, supposed conclusions where, like, they collapse or expand too fast. Like, we have no idea what happens after. It could be that what you said before does happen, where another universe just, pops back in, and it doesn't until it's correct, right? And then at that point, it's absolutely inevitable for life.
Right.
But I'm not saying that that's true. But if that happens, then that's just the case. And then the argument absolutely falls apart, because that chance doesn't matter. Like, it's like, oh, well, every universe has to go through this, except, like, maybe one, because, like, the chance. What happened in the first try, what happened in the second try.
Totally. I mean, that would be just, fine. I mean, that's fine. That's just.
Well, I suppose infinite would happen in the first try, infinite would happen in the second try, infinite would happen in the third try, but whatever.
Yeah, so then what on brings us back with a good point. The question is, under which hypothesis is our world more expected, theism or naturalism? I'm going to say the only way you can expect this type of world, given naturalism, would be some sort of infinite multiverse or infinite generating, universe generating system.
Theism doesn't exclude naturalism, and naturalism isn't the opposite of it. No, it doesn't.
Naturalism is the idea that, at least typically, unless you have some other definition, is the idea that all that we see or whatever is a product of purely natural processes.
Well, I said theism is just the belief in a god.
Yeah.
You can have a natural god.
I think typically naturalism is defined as goes along with atheism, but.
I mean, yeah, in fucking creationist circles, that's what pisses me off. You said the whole thing about the shifting of, like, atheism pisses you off. I really get annoyed when people are like, evolutionism or Darwinism, and it's like, dude, he's not a fucking prophet. If he was brought into the modern day, he wouldn't know what the fuck genetics were, right?
Well, yeah, and he would also have to revise a lot of his theories.
Yeah, he'd also be called a destructive racist.
Right.
Like, it's these points that people make that I'm just like, this isn't an ism, dude. There's no scientism. Like, it's not a fucking.
Oh, there is scientism. There definitely is scientism. It's not all scientists or scientismists, and I don't think you're a scientism head, but yes, there are people that use science of the gaps argument and say, well, we don't know about the fine tuning or whatever, the infinite regress, but science must be able to figure it out. That's scientism.
I mean, if
anything does, blind faith in science is scientism. You have to admit that exists.
Blind faith in science? Like, where does this exist? Like, what are you talking about?
People that deny philosophical,
people that trust in science,
epistemic, ontological arguments by simply saying, well, there must be a scientific answer. But there must not always be a scientific answer.
There must be a scientific answer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that that's like irrelevant. Like,
Yeah,
it's like
it's
I don't think
scientism.
I don't think it's scientism
Why not?
because there's no like prophets. There's no dogma. Like, it's just someone being stupid.
Yeah, no,
like,
the prophets are the
like if someone
the
comes in here
scientists.
and says like,
It's a misunderstanding of science to say that whatever has been agreed upon by science now is de facto true. And I don't think you believe that. I don't think you're one of these people. But there are definitely, I've met them, people out there, and a lot of them, that say these types of
people
things.
who say these things.
Yeah, I've met people that deny theological, philosophical argumentation based on the fact that they don't have empirical evidence of God, and that is science.
Well, I mean that's fine actually. What you just said is like, sure.
Yeah.
If you don't have empirical evidence of it, then I'm kind of don't want to believe it. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
really?
Like,
Oh, wait. So what? So is it your?
generally, yeah.
I'm actually. This is a curious point. Actually.
If you had empirical evidence of God, would you believe? I fucking would.
Oh
like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you don't have that,
But if
and
you
then you present
don't
nothing else,
have it-
then
Yeah. So wait. So is it your belief? Is it your worldview that you should only believe things that you have empirical evidence for?
No. I think you misunderstood. I'm saying that if you have empirical evidence of a thing, then I'd believe it because it's empirical evidence. However, if you say that you don't have empirical evidence and that's where we stop the conversation, then I won't believe you. I'm not saying that there's like no other types of evidence.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying if we just stop at empiricism, like if the only thing we talked about was empiricism, and you were like, I don't have empirical evidence of God, it was like, okay, well that doesn't make me want to believe in it.
Okay, but just as a general question, if I could get like an answer, because I'm curious.
I do believe that there are other proofs other than empiricist proof. Sure.
Okay, good. Because otherwise, that's a self-defeating point.
Yeah, like how do you know what's true?
Right, because then you would I would just ask the question,
one.
which we practiced yesterday or on Wednesday. But just if one believes that you should only hold beliefs that are empirically proven to be true, then all you have to do is ask the question, what empirical proof do you have to hold that belief? And of course, there is none. So that's the self-defeater. But okay. Numenon asked in the chat, what is empirical evidence of God, or what would be an empirical evidence of God?
I have no idea what God knows.
Not quite sure. I would say probably the closest thing I can imagine is if you knew Jesus in his life before his death.
You have to say Jesus, right?
And then he came back, and then you felt, I think Thomas asked for that, the empirical evidence, which is like, feel my wounds, right? Seeing him physically, knowing him in life, knowing that he died, seeing him physically afterwards, that would be probably about as close as you get to empirical evidence of God. Numenon says, technically, there are notions of theism where the God is bound by nature or God is nature. Yeah, so yes, you can incorporate naturalism into some sort of theism, but typically we would call that pantheism, or we would call it something else, maybe just like a pagan God. Really, a God that's bound by nature is
I think that you would say
really
that God is bound by nature.
No, not
is
nature.
Is he bound by his own nature?
His own nature, which is a very different use of that word than.
Okay, what do you mean by nature?
By nature, I just mean the material world, matter, atoms.
Okay, well, that's not what nature is.
Well, what do you think nature is?
In philosophical naturalism, and what I mean by philosophical naturalism is like the necessity of it, because it's all that we can investigate, with the scientific method at least. Even the philosophical kind of area is still enveloped in it.
So everything that we can investigate is nature, then? Is that what it is?
I mean, everything that we can investigate is, yeah, sure, nature, but I think that you would then say that, people with personal revelation can do that, therefore that's not the case because,
right. Because I think
they can technically investigate it.
It's clear that you can investigate God, even if you don't believe in him, you can investigate it, so that wouldn't make him natural.
But philosophical naturalism isn't about, materialism. Philosophical naturalism would say that, for instance, the laws of logic are part of nature. It's the nature of things.
Okay.
It's not like the grass and the trees.
Right.
Not.
Okay. So in philosophical naturalism, the laws of logic.
Materialism is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, yeah. I think those two things get conflated. That's fair. I usually try to use materialism as a little clearer.
Materialism is like a dirty
when it
word
comes
in creationism circles.
Uh, yeah,
It's like
I
a
don't think it
fucking
needs to be a
slur.
dirty word, but yeah, I do think it's certainly wrong. But I mean, I
Filthy
think
fucking
it's
materialists.
materialism is obviously wrong because we interact with the immaterial every day on it. But so anyway, uh, I reject his conceptualization of value system as cults. When we are talking about isms such as Darwinism, we are merely talking about schools of thought and not cults. Yeah, I think that's fair. Do
Schools
you have
of
any
thought?
any
Yeah, but like
response to that?
Darwinism isn't a thing. Like what's
Yeah, it
Darwinism?
is.
Is it just a belief? It's fucking not.
Uh,
Like no
well,
one worshipped Darwin. No one thinks. No one
but
trophied
an
his
ism
fucking
doesn't
thoughts.
require that
Like
you
no one
worship
trophied his book.
anyone. It's just that you abide by a
There's no
specific
dogma either.
belief. Yes, there isn't. Well, okay, no, there isn't by Darwin.
No one had any dogma by Darwin or followed a dogma by Darwin. Darwin is out by 1,000 years, like in
They
terms of
didn't.
fucking like.
They didn't, but now they do. But
No, they
anyway.
don't, because Darwin was wrong.
Yes, he was, which is why it'd be crazy to be a Darwinist.
But that's the thing. Darwinists aren't a thing. Like they don't like. Is there a streetsism? If one person believes in you, are you like? Is there a streetist? Like,
no, but if they believe in
this
the
ism implies like a larger sect of belief that is dedicated to his teachings. That's not what happened. In fact, his fucking beliefs were ripped apart.
No, I completely agree. I mean,
Like I don't like I like this whole like especially in creationism. I'm not talking about you, but like
Yeah.
creationism uses Darwinist as a dirty word as well, right? It's like you fucking Darwinist. Like they believed in Darwin and Darwin's day, and even Darwin doubted that he was right. I was like, we don't give a fuck about Darwin. Like,
well, and in Darwin's day,
initially-
he was derided for being against the church.
he was literally convinced into saying he was Christian just so he could fucking be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the main thing. But also like he was then like, oh, but Darwin actually on his deathbed renounced atheism and was actually a Christian. So I don't give a fuck about Darwin. like Darwin. Today's modern evolutionary biology would be so alien to Darwin.
Yeah.
He'd be a fucking idiot. Like I
Yes.
don't give a fuck about Darwin or his teachings. He lit the
Well, no
spark
one's
that was
accusing
inevitable.
you of being a Darwinist, but so I understand. But I
But
understand.
I wouldn't accuse fucking anyone of it because any belief about modern evolution that anyone has is irrevocably different to Darwin's beliefs. I know nobody that quotes fucking
you're
Origin
right.
of Species in
you're right.
biology class.
I've never met a Darwinist, to be fair.
Yeah, but creationists turn it around like if you believe in evolution, Darwinist. It's like what?
Yeah, I think it's
dude?
just like a term that people use, but
It's like a dirty.
and
word.
I
It's
think
like,
again, creationists have good reason to not believe in evolution is kind of a weird thing because then it almost does set it up as like a cult. But I
When do they
believe
have
that
good evolution?
evolution takes place, like obviously. So
yeah, when do they have good reason to not believe in evolution? We've demonstrated it with flies.
well, I just mean like the terminology "believe in." It's like you believe.
Well, believe
in
that
it,
it,
like,
sorry,
that,
believe
like,
that it is the best explanation that we have
exactly.
for the diversity of life on this planet. There you go.
Yeah.
Do we really want to
Except
say
I
that
would
every
just
single
believe-
time?
Yeah, I would just say no. I'm not saying you shouldn't say believe in. I'm just saying that's how those types of terms come about. Darwinist, evolutionist, or whatever people say, is because people often
Sure.
talk about believe. You either believe in evolution or you believe in God, and it's like those things are obviously not mutually exclusive. You don't believe in evolution. You believe that it takes place, but you do believe.
I just don't
in
think that
God.
there's ever really a good example for people not believing in evolution. Like it's like, especially these people that say, I'm just making you lose viewers at this point. But
No, you're good.
the people that say like I believe in macro or I believe in microevolution, not macroevolution. It's like the only difference is time, motherfucker. Like the only difference is the amount of it that happens.
Right. I think the argument there. Well, first let's go to the chat because we got some people. So, Numenon says also infamous seems to reject empiricism as an epistemological position. Is that true?
No, I don't.
You don't. All right. Does that mean
No,
you
I
are
mean,
an
if
empiricist?
this
or-
is based, I'm not an empiricist. Like I don't believe that empiricism is the only way to know anything, but I believe in empiricism. I think that there are empirical.
Yeah. But just it's just not your epistemology. Like you can't empirically.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my whole. Yeah, it's not my whole epistemology. Yeah.
Right. It's just part of the bigger picture. So then the second part is irrelevant. Numenon just asked, but then how do you receive knowledge beyond the senses within a physicalist worldview? But you don't have a physicalist worldview,
Yeah,
so
I don't
you
think that
do
you can.
receive knowledge beyond the senses. Or do you not?
I mean, yeah. I mean, the idea of self isn't based on the senses. Like,
Right.
for instance, I'm just going to say children, but babies in utero who have no senses have nervous systems.
Yep.
And I guess you can say that that's a sense, but like, any time that I guess if you gain your first sense, you technically have experience, subjective consciousness. But I guess an experience of no experience is still a subjective experience. So I would say maybe on the basis level, I would have to kind of think about that. But
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards there's at least probably one subjective experience, which is the subjective experience of no experience.
Okay. Yeah, so
no
whatever
sensory
that
experience.
is, I don't know exactly what whatever that is. It's not exactly your typical physicalist empirical.
Yeah, I definitely don't
epistemology.
believe that all exists is the physical.
Okay, so there is Marshall Esoteric says there is no dogma, but there is a value system which has a coherent logic in reference to, say, like Darwinism or whatever.
Right, I'm just talking about the way it's used. Like it's
Yeah,
used like it's used in the same way that let's be generous. It's used in the same way that atheists use creationism. It's a dirty word.
Yep.
Like it's viewed that way. It's not like empiricism, right? It's not. No one views that as a dirty word.
Right. Some isms are more loaded than others.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's like a
so
loaded term.
the Marshall Esoteric says, lol, he thinks I'm a creationist. I don't think he thinks that, but he probably did respond to something you said.
Oh, sorry.
Same.
If I was, yeah, I mean, I was probably jumping off something you said. I more went on a tangent. I don't think anyone in here is a creationist. When I say that I'm
Yeah.
probably making you lose viewers, I mean like future viewers. There's a lot of creationists that like to watch YouTube.
Right. So the theory of evolution is still widely used, and that theory emerged out of many thinkers conceiving such. And yeah, it's been used and also changed and updated to be more accurate.
Yeah, Darwin's Origin of Species is just the most comprehensive original idea for the natural selection.
Right,
Also.
and even though it has a slew of problems, it was a good jumping off point for the modern
Like
sciences
racism.
too. Yeah, like general racism and
Have you ever seen that Discovery Institute documentary where they just go, Darwin had all these things wrong in his theory, and then he goes, Darwin was also a racist, and I'm like, how does this matter? We're talking about science. Like, what are you talking about?
yeah. That's a bit of an ad
Like
hominem.
everyone in his fucking day was a fucking racist. Like we really want to go back to fucking like popes? Do we want to go look at popes?
Yeah. So then Numenon says, so my issue is how Infamous can have universal knowledge within his worldview or knowledge beyond his senses. Within Christianity, we can assess higher immaterial truths. I would say that Numenon does not,
No,
I mean,
you
sorry,
can't.
that Infamous doesn't actually claim to have any universal knowledge. Is that accurate?
I don't claim to have any knowledge beyond my experiences.
Okay.
Not necessarily beyond
Yeah.
my subjective experience, because, or sorry, definitely my subjective experience, but not necessarily beyond my senses, because I don't know if you consider thinking a sense, but I can definitely think of things based on my senses, I guess you would say. But they are not sensory experiences. They are
Yep.
experiences based on my senses. They're not from my senses.
Um,
And not only that, I agree. I don't think anyone can have experience outside of those things. If you do consider
Yep.
those thought senses,
yeah, that is.
I don't think anyone can.
So this is like an interesting point. Marshall Esoteric says, I'm gonna basically frame this comment. He says, I'm not conceptualizing, Darwinism as dogma. When people say believe, it's a colloquial shorthand for saying that you adhere
Yeah.
to the logical set of claims. So fair enough.
Yeah.
I think we agree with that. Numenon says, wait, so is Infamous like a platonic atheist? That's a good question, actually.
What the fuck is a platonic atheist?
So that would be someone who does not believe in any sort of like personal creator God, but believes in the platonic forms. Like, for instance, the ideal. Well, I guess maybe we could call something that I know you.
I believe in like the laws of logic, which are like ideals of logic. Sure.
And you believe those sort of just exist in like this platonic realm, right? Like they're not created by humans.
Not necessarily a realm. I believe they exist. I don't know how
Where?
they exist.
Where
I have
do
no
they-
way to. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like saying where does nothing exist? It's like, well,
Well, it's
Doesn't
not
make
like saying
sense. I
that
don't know
because
if it's
this is not nothing. They're not nothing.
No,
so
I'm not
it's
saying that
like
they're comparable. I'm not saying the subjects are comparable. I'm saying the questions are comparable, and in the fact that the question doesn't make sense. Where does the square circle
but
exist?
you can
Well,
by like I don't know if it's deductive, but you can see where it doesn't exist only. For instance, it doesn't only exist in the
Streets,
mind
where does
of
God
people.
exist?
I don't know. I don't know.
Exactly.
But I know
That's
where
my
he
thoughts.
I know where he doesn't exist exclusively.
I also know
and
where
for
they don't
instance,
exist.
that
I just
would
don't know where
be
they do.
Right. So that's fair. So it's sort of agnostic about
Like, I
where
can't find them in my
exactly the nature of these immaterial transcendental categories are, just that they're out there somewhere. So in that way, that kind of would push you into the Platonic camp. And you don't have to conceptualize it as a realm or something, but you acknowledge there's a reality structure out there separate from yourself or any
They have a
subjective
reality
experience.
to them. Sure, they're real.
Yeah. So they are real. So yeah, at least in the terms of the most fundamental things, the transcendentals, the laws of logic, you do actually have sort of a Platonic view of those things.
I mean, I guess you can call it that. I more think that they have to exist based on the fact that other things exist. I don't know if they purely exist as properties of those things when those things are instantiated, or exist prior to their instantiations. I think that you could have a view of reality where that every single thing that comes into existence has its own set of laws of identity and laws of non-contradiction, and something could come into existence that doesn't have those laws, but like that, like maybe the universe itself has those laws, therefore it can't happen. You could use it for any arbitrary object, or maybe everything in general. I'm not sure. Like, I think there's nothing about that idea that seems like necessarily contradictory to me. But it would infinitely increase the difference between me saying that the logical absolutes are the only things that exist, and you being like God is the only thing that exists. But if I say that the logical absolutes exist for every single given item, I'm in a much different position.
That's what I would call building your house on sand. But that's
So
just
people can build houses on sand?
They sure can. They just when a storm comes. But anyway, that was just a reference. That was a callback to Wednesday. We talked a lot about that.
But if you can be
okay.
more specific, I can.
So Numenon has a good question. I think I want to kind of give a shot to Steelman your case, and then you like we've been doing. So Numenon says, "Sorry for grilling Infamous's views exclusively, but if he doesn't have universal knowledge, then how do you know there isn't an evil deceiver out there somewhere making you commit reasoning mistakes?" To which I think you would say, "I don't know that." You would just say, "I don't know that." Right?
No, I can know that. I can know that.
Oh, you know that there's not an evil, or sorry.
Yeah, the idea is contradictory. Like, the same way the square circle can't exist because, separate from my sensory perception. Like, the idea that a great deceiver can deceive me means that he would have to not exist, because if he does exist, he'd have like a truth claim. He'd be deceiving himself.
Right. So you're saying,
unless you're defining the great deceiver as like someone that just exclusively lies to me and makes it so that I'm not coherent.
Well, yeah, you couldn't know that wasn't the case. I think that maybe is what he's pointing to.
Does that mean that all of my reasoning is wrong? Because if all of my reasoning is wrong, that means that I can't. I mean, that means that that means you're saying that saying that I exist
is
can't
wrong.
Be reasonable.
Yeah,
but that's impossible.
Is that impossible?
Because for me, yeah,
right. For you
to deceive me, I need to exist.
Yeah. I get that.
So, like, even from there, like, my reasoning has to start with the logical absolutes, because I exist, which is the law of identity. Like,
yeah, from what I understand about your worldview, for the clarity of Numenon, it's essentially that you accept certain fundamental principles as axiomatic, because otherwise there's just nothing to talk about, right? I mean, so the laws of logic,
they're self-defeating. Their non-existence is self-defeating. Exactly,
their non-existence is self-defeating. So beyond that, you make no universal claims, but on the claims that sort of you have to make, you accept those.
Well, like, for instance, if you were to say the logical absolutes are wrong, that would need to be a truth claim, which would need to follow the logical absolutes.
Yep.
So yeah. So
Okay,
I
so-
can to address it more coherently. There isn't a great deceiver that can deceive my fundamental thinking.
Okay,
but doesn't that
so
lead to a
first I'm
problem
going
in
to
his
say
view?
bye
Like, one,
to Marshall Esotericist. Base brother, well, yeah, have fun at the gym and get swole for us. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
And good input. Okay.
But
So
doesn't
yeah, you
that
want to
lead
respond
to
to
the
this?
problem in his view? Like, one, the evil deceiver existing is incoherent. Two, wait, the evil deceiver existing is incoherent. I mean, I think that that's true. I don't know how that would be a problem. Your view allows for metaphysical possibility of an evil deceiver existing. Thus, wouldn't that run into the same self-contradictory issue?
Okay,
No,
I'm trying to understand
because my foundation. He's saying that if my foundations lead to the possible existence of him, then we're back circling around.
That is a decent
like-
point. I'd like to think about that for a second. So let me just get my head around it. So
Sure.
if it's incoherent, if it's impossible for the evil deceiver to exist because he would have to deceive you about your own self, then there would have to be a self for him to deceive.
No, he's saying that he says that even if he exists later, it doesn't matter because we wrap back around. He's saying that, okay, your reasoning is reliable, but in your reliable world, he can exist. Therefore, we're back around to him fucking with your contradictory thinking, and we're just in an infinite loop.
Interesting. Okay, how do you respond to that?
I don't believe possible worlds.
This is a very controversial view that
No. But it's just the joke that I don't believe in possible worlds. I don't think that they can be instantiated. I don't think you can demonstrate them. I think that they're like
Infamous believes that you have no free will, so that's an important point.
I also believe that you have no free will, yes, but
which is also self-defeating, by the way. Have we talked about how that's self-defeating or no?
I mean, I guess you've tried a few times, but let me just get this out.
Let me
just get this out first.
Yeah.
The thing about the possible worlds is that I don't think they can be demonstrated, but I also think that they're saying that they're logically contradictory, which I think that we can say that things are logically contradictory with reality, and I think that possibility contradicts reality. You denied universal knowledge, but wouldn't you need universal knowledge about all reality to know nowhere in reality does he ever exist? I'm not saying he doesn't exist. I'm saying that, well, I'm not saying that he doesn't exist because of some universal knowledge. I'm actually saying it based on the fact that I exist. He can't deceive me into thinking that I don't exist because he would need to deceive me.
You would only have to have the universal knowledge or like make a universal claim about one point, which is I exist. So he couldn't deceive you about that point because to deceive you have to be there, right?
Also, look up epistemic possibility versus metaphysical possibility. Yeah, I deny metaphysical possibility.
Yeah, which is crazy. But anyway, so the self-defeater for free will not existing, in my view, and you tell me where this breaks apart, is if there is no free will, you have no option other than to believe what you believe right now, even if that belief is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. So you have absolutely no way to say that your belief is correct because you have no other choice.
Reverse the argument and replace wrong with right.
If you have no free will, you have no possibility of believing anything other than you believe, even if that view is right.
Doesn't seem so bad now, does it?
Yeah, it does. Still seems like it runs into the exact same problem.
Just because I don't have any free will doesn't mean I am right.
It doesn't mean you're not right, but it doesn't give you any reason to believe that you are right.
I mean, based on that fact, yeah. That's why we don't use free will as arguments.
Okay.
Like, for instance, I don't be like, I'm not saying 1 + 1 = 2 because I have free will. Like, I'm saying 1 + 1 = 2 because it's demonstrable.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's not really a defeater, but it is a problem, it seems like. If there is free will, then you actually make decisions about what you believe, and you could draw a conclusion from a set of data to hold that belief. But if there is no free will, there's no sort of amount of analysis about the data and all this stuff. What's that?
Why couldn't I do all the things you just described and have it be determined? I don't understand.
Because you could be determined to be wrong.
It could be.
Okay.
Some people are.
So you're just happy to be like, you're agnostic about the point of free will then? Or no?
No. I think that things are determined. I just don't particularly care about people who like, you could be wrong. I'm like, yeah, it could be.
Okay. Okay, so at least you admit that there's space for you to be wrong about the truth of free will.
No, about the truth of any given claim. Like, like, I don't know everything in the universe. Is there some magical formula that's just like free will exists?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Wait, hang on. I disagree. If deceiver exists, you couldn't even trust the cognito, in my opinion. I'm sorry, cogito. You have to, because you're being deceived. For the sentence "you are being deceived" requires me. I'm the first thing. Like, we can even change cogito. I am being deceived, therefore I exist.
Well, I guess the deceiver could deceive himself into you
Thinking that he doesn't exist, then he doesn't exist.
well, into thinking that he is you when really you don't exist. You're just the deceiver the whole time, or something like that.
But then we're back to the original thing, which is I exist. I'm just also the deceiver.
Right. Yeah, I'm.
He could make you commit
I'm
reasoning mistakes
partial to
constantly, but then you cannot trust even your reasoning up to the point of affirming the possibilities of an evil deceiver. I feel like you're just repeating yourself now. He has to deal with me. The basis of my logical reasoning is not affected by an evil deceiver, because it can't be. It literally can't be. The idea that he exists is only allowed in my worldview because of the foundations of my worldview.
Okay.
If I have no worldview that has no basis, he doesn't exist.
Okay.
Which means he can't deceive me into not having reasoning, which means I have reasoning, which means he's possible, etc., etc., etc. So it's just a thought experiment. It's just going around. It's an Ouroboros. Like, I have reasoning. The snake has a head.
Yeah. And so you take your existence to be a brute fact, right? I mean, it just is.
I mean, I think that anyone in the
I don't know how
universe
it
has to
is.
take
I don't
that.
know where it is. Yeah. Well, I don't take it as a brute fact. I presume that I exist with logical faculties because I was created to have such logical faculties. But so you don't have to take it as a brute fact, but you stop it at the brute fact level, like you do with the transcendentals, right?
I think the self kind of, exists alongside those, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the self is a transcendental category, to be fair.
Like, I agree we can't doubt the self. My point is that if a grand and evil deceiver exists, then that undercuts even the self. No, it doesn't, because he's affecting me. Like, this is what we're saying. Like, he has to deal with me. Me is a thing. He couldn't deceive me existing, because he would have to deceive something. I would be the something. And for me to have any experience of deception, I need to exist. You couldn't convince me I don't exist, because to conceptualizing I don't exist is the idea I exist. Like, you couldn't convince me that I was wrong about the law of identity, because it starts with I. You could convince me I was wrong about the law of non-contradiction, because if I was wrong, I could also be right.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, Numenon. I understand your point, Numenon. So he's saying, because to even say that you're already assuming there isn't a defeater for the cogito. So you are saying there isn't a defeater of the cogito. I think you're giving good reasons for why there isn't.
I'm not saying there isn't a defeater. I'm saying this isn't a defeater.
Well, if there is a defeater, then he could deceive you.
But I have no evidence that can happen. I have zero evidence that can happen.
Right. And yeah, now we're back to evidence. But he could hide that evidence from you. But the argument is that he could hide that evidence from you, but obviously there has to be a you to hide it from. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Everything that would try and convince me that I don't exist or that one of the logical absolutes don't exist, use the logical absolutes or myself.
Right. I think that's...
I need you to like actually like kind of write out what I'm saying. Like, do you understand that any application of a deception requires me, which requires the logical absolutes, so that there's no way in which he could deceive me that would it would get around the logical absolutes? you understand that?
Yeah, I think even the deceiver existing at all confirms the logical absolutes.
Yeah, even he can't escape the logical absolutes. That's the thing.
He
That's
has to be
another
identical with
proof.
himself. He couldn't be not himself and himself. Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Like, what am I allowing for?
I'm with you on this. I think the evil deceiver could defeat pretty much anything other than the transcendental categories. I also just happen to think the transcendental categories are grounded in something.
The evil deceiver is literally just a fancy devil painted argument of solipsism.
Yes. Yep.
Point is, you're appealing to the lack of a defeater, but the point is that once you grant that the evil deceiver can hide the defeaters, that then I don't accept that. I don't accept that he could. The fact that you called them defeaters or that they have an identity at all means they can't be.
Yeah, because ultimately the defeater would have to be a defeater to the law of identity, etc. And if they are defeaters to the law of identity, they can't not be defeaters to the law of identity. Therefore, the law of identity is existent or whatever. Yeah, Numenon. I think unless you have a new tact, I don't think this is going to get through.
What were you going to say, though? Oh, wait, no, never mind. You already went through the defeater for the free will thing.
Yeah, I just think that there would be no reason to trust your view that there is no free will, given the fact that if there were no free will, you could not have any other view. That's pretty much it. And maybe you don't see that as a defeater. That's fine. But to me, that's pretty powerful.
I mainly don't because, like, I can be determined to be right. Does that make me wrong?
No. You're right. I don't think it makes you wrong. I just think you can't say with any certainty that there is no free will.
Well, I think I can, right? Like just because I'm predetermined to not believe those things or believe those things, like, I don't care how veracitously someone believes that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, they're wrong. And I don't care if I'm determined to believe that because I'm correct for reasons, not for justifying my belief.
I guess the defeater
I
guess the defeater is to the point of debating any individual point, even the point of free will.
We're trying to change anyone's mind, maybe, sure.
Yeah, given the fact that nobody's mind can be changed, essentially.
Well, but they can. That's the thing. Is that, like,
right.
They can be changed
They can't be changed based on logic or reason or evidence. They can only be changed deterministically, and maybe logic and reason and evidence are sort of this like tool of deterministic outcome, but at the end of the day, you're not employing logic to adopt any new position. You're just following the deterministic path of what you were already going to believe from the beginning of time till the end of time, until the deterministic path makes you change your mind or whatever. So it's just kind of like,
I mean, it doesn't make you change your mind. Like, the laws of physics just dictate what you will be accessible to, and the fucking, like, the ideas you get presented to you, like, what can convince you, etc., etc. But it's the randomness, or seeming randomness, that we go through life with that make it seem like we have free will. Like for instance, if you come up to me tomorrow and present an argument that, like, I feel is reasonable, etc., etc. I didn't expect that. Oh my God, it's free will. It's a happenstance. What's the chances of that? Realistically, I was always going to meet you there. You were always going to tell me that argument, and I was always going to be convinced by it because it is what convinced.
That is your view. So, fair enough. I that doesn't comport with my intuition or worldview, but that's totally fine. We can have different views.
Yeah.
So okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Also, just to respond to Newman for the last time.
Yeah.
My point is that your view is on the verge of collapsing into such a view. Yeah, well, if you're on the verge of collapse, you haven't collapsed. So.
Right. But again, it's like that is when you build a house on sand, it's on the verge of collapse, and it might just take one little thing to blow it over.
Yeah, it's just that like this evil deceiver, like, he is an evil deceiver, so he is the law of identity. Like, he has the law of identity. He's talking to me, so I have the self. Like.
Yep.
Unless you can remove the logical absolutes from the situation, which I don't think you could utter a sentence that does that, the evil deceiver defeats himself.
Right.
Like unless you can beat, unless you can. Go on.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, unless you can like rephrase solipsism to defeat the cogito, like,
Hmm.
I don't think you're making any argument.
Yeah, and I think to be what I was going to say to Nuna, I think we can be happy that we have this sort of defeater for the most radical form of solipsism. That like intentionally or unintentionally or just by happenstance, by deterministic happenstance, Infamous has given us a tool to sort of resist the radical skepticism that we sometimes are faced with. So I think we can be
Yeah,
grateful.
and also
for that
just
type
on
of...
that last thing, but does the internal critique of an evil deceiver's worldview make sense? Like within those belief systems, appeal to your own reasoning sometimes seems meaningless. Yeah, that's solipsism.
Right.
That's the idea of solipsism. That's the whole point.
Does the internal critique of the evil deceiver worldview make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean that is the hard problem. The hard problem of solipsism at the end of the day. Cool. Well, I think we did a lot today. We've been at it for about 3 hours. I think we had some good stuff, some good conversation. Some stuff we've done, but I think for the benefit of the chat, it's good to get back into a lot of these topics.
I
And I
got
hope...
to know a lot more about my worldview, I guess, which I guess
well,
was the last stream.
that was the last stream, but that's always a theme that we can go to. And maybe we can quickly, because we now have a more complete view of Infamous worldview, let's just ask the simple, and I think I already know the answer, but we'll ask the simple question.
Am I a Christian? No.
Are you a Christian? No. Are the transcendental categories, like we've been talking about this whole time, grounded in anything, or do they exist as brute facts, or are you just totally agnostic to that, towards that?
No, I've no idea.
Okay.
Anything that I could go past that would justify them exists alongside them.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so that's what we were doing with the worldview audit. We were just basically asking people what their worldviews are, and then we were putting them up against the transcendental categories and seeing where they fall in line on that. And I think we have a good idea now of where Infamous is at within that structure.
If God ever asked me on my deathbed and I see a vision of him, like, why were you an atheist? I was like, because it made so much fucking sense. Why have you done this?
Even then, you would say that.
I mean, I don't think that's at the top of my bucket list. Leukemia might be up there.
Leukemia, why would you? Yeah, so you'd have some questions for God, for sure.
I definitely would have some questions for God, and just like doubting Thomas, I would feel the need for him to answer.
Yeah.
Unless he's telling me I'm worse than doubting Thomas, in which case I would just be like, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Well, I think it's fair to say doubting Thomas was quite a amazing disciple, but so I think all of us fall short of his...
Of doubting Thomas.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of read the story of doubting Thomas a little differently. I don't see him as a villain in that story. I see him as the rational disciple that was given a proof, and maybe he shouldn't have needed it, or maybe he should have, or maybe you're blessed to not need it, or maybe you are. But it's an example. And then the end of the story is, of course, that he is the one that evangelizes a vast swath of Asia, which is just incredible.
I actually don't think it's good. I think in the Bible it's actually not good to have faith like justification without reason. I think that the sentence, basically when he says doubting Thomas, like it's good for those that don't need proof.
Well, he just said blessed are those that have not seen and believe. He doesn't say it's good to not have proof. He's just saying blessed are
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I couldn't think of the thing, but I think what it really gets down to is wait. Did you read aloud from the "but I get your position"? Okay. Give me a second while I figure this out. What was I saying? Oh yeah. The thing with doubting Thomas is I feel when he says "blessed are those that believe and have not seen" is that what he says is that like it's lucky that they aren't burdened with the curse of needing to know.
Right.
Like they aren't burdened with this curse that they logically in their brain need to be convinced to believe in salvation.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because while they may not be there for reasonable reasons, lots more important
enact
to be justified in believing God or to believe in God. I think that you
Right.
would think that it's just believing in God.
Yeah.
And
but
that
of
doubting
course,
Thomas is truly cursed by the fact that he needs that, and God realizes that he needs that and then gives him it.
Yeah, and I'll just, in reference to this, not making any point, but just I'll read 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. So, the Bible is vast and complex, and so we're both commanded to, we're told that blessed are those who have not seen and believed, but we're also commanded to have reasons, and those reasons can be logical, evidentiary, they can just be your personal experience and testimony or whatever it is, but we are commanded to have a rationale for our belief. So I'll do that, and then do you want to read so Numenon, do you see that comment? Do you want to read his comment specifically and address that?
I will. But yes, I get your position. You're saying that we're assuming the laws of logic before even entertaining the possibility of an evil deceiver, and thus this whole scenario already assumes the laws of logic. The point is that this is an internal critique of the system where the evil deceiver exists, as within those belief systems, your own appeals to your reasoning become invalid. It is a self-refuting worldview. My point is that your view is on the verge of collapsing into such a view. But does the internal critique of the evil deceiver worldview make sense? Like within those belief systems, appeal to your own reasoning seems to become meaningless. So this is the argument that Said and Berdicke made against he used it with the idea of God being a defeater for the evil deceiver, which is, funny, haha, Snake Man.
Right.
They even have, an insert thing. But I've never seen anyone prove this. I've never seen any single person prove that any worldview can defeat this, because it's literally solipsism wrapped in a bag. It's in a funny Halloween costume. Solipsism is the view that you can't prove anything outside the cogito. I think Sai actually says that even the cogito is defeated by solipsism, which isn't true. But he basically just says that his worldview can defeat it with God, but he can't demonstrate it. And so I would ask him to demonstrate it. And for you, I would say that every worldview falls short of solving solipsism, which is basically just that you can't trust your senses to prove you're not in the Matrix.
I'd say every demonstration falls short of solipsism, but obviously worldviews themselves solve the problem, i.e. just believing in God that he gives us rational faculties would solve it. But again, that you're asking for a demonstration, not a worldview that will, right? So
seems like a problem
to correspondence theory of truth. Let's look that up because I'm not even sure what that is. Correspondence theory of truth.
Well, no, because solipsism just says that you can't trust your faculties or your senses, which I don't think a coherentist worldview would work, considering the coherentist worldview.
So, correspondence theory of truth. Just this for myself and anyone else that might be interested. A statement. The correspondence theory of truth is that a statement is true if and only if it corresponds to reality or facts. And so, the way this applies here, I guess, is that if there is such a evil deceiver, then there is really no truth. Except then I think Infamous and even I would say, still there are truths like the law of identity.
But how about the fact that we instantiated a truth and we started it, which is the evil deceiver exists?
Sure. But the correspondence theory, I mean, yeah, that. I think there's good reason. There's a lot of good reasons for us to reject solipsism and reject radical skepticism.
How about the practical one, which is I can't get out of the Matrix until someone gives me the red pill.
Right. Coherence theory we did talk about before. You're a coherentist, right? An internal critique of solipsism seems to be enough, but I could be wrong. Coherence theory, truth is internal consistency within a system of beliefs, and so I guess the idea is that
you can end this with him. I have to go see my girlfriend.
All right, peace, brother. God bless you. I hope you're very happy together. That sounds fun. Good. Okay. See you, brother. See ya. So Numenon. I'm kind of interested in this coherence theory because I don't have a full picture of it in my mind. I'm reading it now, and you've mentioned it, but I'm not. So the way that it applies to solipsism, if I'm right, and you correct me here, would be that if truth is internal consistency within a system of beliefs, then the evil deceiver destroys any consistency and basically any system of beliefs, except for maybe the most foundational things. Is that somewhat accurate? What is truth? Agreement between thought and reality. Example, the sky is blue is true only if the sky is actually blue. Yeah. All right. I think that's a good spot. Great conversation, guys. I'm glad we actually got to push back on Infamous. Sometimes it's just me, and that's hard. And so I appreciate having you guys around to help me. But I think we did a good job today. And, I think a lot of this is not about convincing someone in particular. It's about showing what their worldview costs, right? And so I think the cost of the worldview that you can't know anything to be true except for maybe that I exist is that you can't make universal claims. You can't presume some sort of objective, I don't know, morality or reality, or you can't say anything about how we're created or how we came here or anything like that. So yeah, we're just seeing, and so one thing that we saw that was the cost of Infamous's worldview is that he can't believe in free will. He can't believe in possible metaphysical worlds, or metaphysical possibility he can't believe in. And so to me, that's a genuine loss. I think we are benefited by believing in those things and accepting them to be true. For a lot of reasons that we outlined. So thank you all. Super fun stream. Really good arguments, really good back and forth here. A little different than last time, but that's how we like it. So appreciate you guys. I will see you next week on Monday. All right. Peace, everybody.